Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second YouTube exclusive episode of The Adventures of Blackwater, which is, as promised, the audio recordings of session summaries from when we played our home game. Now, these were generally recorded a day or two after the session took place, so they're full of details of things my notes can't even capture. They're full of things that I didn't even remember when we went through the Chatwater episodes talking about them. It was such a joy making them for the crew and to have them as something I could send out to the gang before we played our next session. And I'm really excited to release them to you now that we've completed our recap of the Barmwich Arc. Another thing, these are raw audio recorded on my phone, most often quietly in my house or in my car, so the quality's not the best. But it's worth the listen to if you like this sort of thing, if you're like me and you like a really deep dive into story and lore and, the fantastical history of your favorite adventuring party. So turn this on while you drive, cook, clean, work, or whatever your day holds. And welcome to the Blackwater Archives, the Barmwich Arc. Hello, everyone. Here with your episode 44 recap for Blackwater, which happened on September 7th, 2019. This episode I'm titling Beneath the Tower. So, as we stepped through the Alder Gate, it opens before us on this unfamiliar or seemingly unfamiliar forest with trees of fir and juniper, maple and aspen. Leaves starting to turn yellow. We figured out that it's been a couple weeks since we've last been on the material plane after Neppy cast sending to Kamea to try and figure out when it was or if everything is okay. So we step through and the air is crisp and there's some faint kind of morning light peeking through the trees. The woods are very calm and the alder gate kind of falls away next to us. Ahead there's a small creek with some clear water. It's like this earthy dampness as it starts to rain, opening up on like a pitter patter of rain, and then it kind of turns into this steady fall. Finnan is walking ahead as he kind of stormed out ahead of us near the creek. Sorry, baby's just rolling around, and I want to make sure I'm not being too loud. Okay, we're good. So it seems like fall is approaching, so Neppy casts sending to Kamea and figures out that it's been a few weeks since we've last been in contact. Cora Thorngage has been crowned queen, or voted to be queen, which is deeply unsettling to all of us. And there's a coronation in a few, and that's how it cuts off a few, and then at the end of it cuts off. And so Neppy relays this information to everyone, and so Spooky is obviously exceedingly upset, knowing what the Thorngages have done to her family and to her. So everyone kind of takes a peek around to kind of try and get a sense of the forest, and Spooky actually knows pretty close to where we are. We're about 1 week from her hometown of Barmwich, and she remembers that she found her spooky pants in a tower close to here. We're about a day's travel from this town called Hartsville, and we're pretty close to this tower. So we make way for this tower to kind of seek some refuge, just to take a peek and see what's there still, if anything's, because it's been about 2 or 3 years since Spooky's been there. And then we'll head to Hartsvale and then Barmwich by way of that. So Spooky talks about how Barmwich was really lovely once, and it had been tainted by the Thorngages who disrupted political power and all of that kind of stuff, and were just pretty awful people. Are pretty awful people. Cora, we're not sure if she and Fildo have kind of always taken what they could and kind of turned the law to their own use. So we make for this tower, which we see, and there's this remnants, and it's in a bit more of a state of disrepair than Spooky remembers it. Some of the floors have fallen out of the upper floor, etc., etc. And we see the skeleton Spooky found her pants on, and there's just some bone shards left of it. So we tuck into this little alcove, and Finnan uses this new ability that he had gained from his patron, where he can see through walls, and sees that there's nothing really, nobody really around up here, but there's a large rock in the center we're kind of on the ground level, or we're like outside in this little alcove area, and then inside there's this rock that we can see in there that looks really big. So Neppy takes a moment, and uses her eyes of the grave to kind of see if there's any undead around, and she can sense two what are known as deathlock wights below us. So a deathlock is a wight is kind of like a servant of a deathlock, which is a warlock turned evil. So not good. Neppy feels pretty unsettled by this, and says that she feels like it's her duty to stay and root this out, and apologizes if it's derailing plans to keep going forward. But the existence of these creatures is an abomination to her goddess, so she has to stay. So they Letters asks Spooky about her name, Spooky, and as we're traveling forward, and she tells him her name is Ziana, and she decides to keep her spooky pants on at this point. She's worried that, maybe she should take them off if something bad could happen here, but she keeps them on. She decides to keep her pants on at this point. So Spooky sends Wiggles to investigate the first floor, this inner floor where this rock boulder is, and he doesn't see anything particularly useful, or he just sees this big stone boulder in the center of the floor. So we climb into the first floor, and a large boulder, and underneath we see the corners of the hatch. Letters and Callie and Neppy move the rock, but of course we forget to check if it's trapped first, and a glyph of warding hits Letters and Spooky and Kokanee and Neppy, and does some big ass damage to us, because it's a lock. And so before we go, Neppy decides to the grave once again and finds 4 deathlock wights this time, rather than just the 2. Before they go in, Neppy gives Kokanee the diamonds, a set of diamonds, as he can now has the ability to bring people back if they die through Vivify, telling him that he helped her bring Spooky back last time, and he can do this on his own now if he needs to. And so Kokanee picks the lock, which is not too hard, and opens the hatch, and this kind of stale air pours out. Not necessarily rotten per se, but just super stale. And we go down, and we kind of all pile into this first chamber, and there's this barrel kind of sitting in the middle of the room, and Letters goes over to investigate it, and it he opens the barrel, and this skeletal face and hands kind of claw out, and we realize this is one of the wights, and we fall into combat. So we end up fighting 4 of the wights. Finnan summons this celestial creature called a Chatwater, and it doesn't quite know why we've summoned it, and the wights go to attack it, and it takes a lot of damage, and as we're kind of all fighting in a hallway, we hit it a couple times with or Finnan hits it a couple times with Eldritch Blast, and trying to make sure that we're not hitting this thing, and then in the end of the fight, it kind of it's Coatl is like a flying serpent, winged feathery serpent. Sorry, baby's just moving around. He's very silly right now. And so we end up killing all of these wights pretty easily, making quick work of them. And then we decide to keep going down the hallway, and because we're stupid dum-dums, we don't look for traps again. And there's another glyph that attacks, that gets us, and it does a decent amount of necrotic energy to us, which is interesting. Different energy than the one that was the energy up at the top of the thing that was keeping the hatch closed was blue, and the one down here was a sickly kind of yellow energy. And it was not necrotic damage, it was like lightning damage, I think, up top, but this one was necrotic. So our two wizards, Letters and Spooky, keep looking for traps as they're decent at investigation, and we see this large black figure kind of facing away from us, focusing on a desk. We hear in our mind these whispers and like sounds that's like babbling, and it renders the two wizards stunned. They fail some wisdom saves, so we fight this creature called an Alep. So the Alep forces Callie to attack Finn, and she tries to slash him in the back. Kokanee managed to just rip this creature to shreds in one turn, with 5 attacks. And it we are able to kind of, once this Alep is dead, and just kind of this energy just like whoosh, just like dispels throughout the room, and we know that there's another hallway off of the main chamber, so we're going to go back and take a look at that. And Neppy doesn't get any sense that there's any other creatures here, not within 60 feet at least, with her eyes of the grave. So she or everyone take a look around the room, and there's this enchanting table. Spooky finds this, it's mostly burned and charred, and there's not much left, but she finds a page with arcane lettering. There's a skeleton of a small animal that looks like it used to be in some sort of preserving liquid, like in a jar, but the jar is long broken, and the skeleton of the creature long desiccated, or the skin long desiccated, and she finds a couple platinum pieces. So we go to investigate the other side, and we see there's another glyph. Spooky tries to dispel it a couple times, and manages to do so, which is great. As we go around the corner and we come over to this room, we see this circle of cultists, and we have a sense that they're undead. In around the center of this room, kind of, they're not really doing anything, they're just kind of standing there. Spooky casts a fireball in the room and just incinerates everything in there to shreds. So we go in, and we take a look around the room, and she finds this curved dagger. It looks like a ceremonial dagger, but it has your hand kind of like wraps into it, and there's these kind of pokey or slicey bits that look as if it's a dagger where you would bloodlet yourself, essentially. There's a bunch of tattered robes that have these yellow markings on them that were similar to the markings that we found on the priest who was in the sewers below Fawe Tavar. Jar had called him the sleeping man. When we rescued Jar from the sewer, this priest at the time at Fawe Tavar was long dead, but the markings are the same. So we this altar there, the cultists were centered around an altar which is about 5 feet tall, that it's patterned and it spirals out, and it like the spirals kind of go out and around into the floor, and it looks like there's drips or like circles, like little holes in the floor. And Neppy's eyes kind of go wide, and she starts to get very concerned, and she takes a moment to think about it, and she puts together the robes in the sewers, and she knows this symbol, and she knows what this is. This is a temple, or a temple of Tharazdun, the Chained Oblivion, which is likely what the thing below Fawe Tavar was as well. And so Neppy thinks about the Chained Oblivion, and there's been some uprisings in her order's history, where they've fought off uprisings of the Chained Oblivion, and we know that the Chained Oblivion was one who kicked off, who was instrumental in the Dawn War, and there was some bad mamma jamma about that. So Neppy's very, very concerned, and this is very, very, very bad. Letters asks Clack to speak with the stone, which is a Petch ability that he's able to kind of get a sense of the stone and talk to the stone as he is of stone. And these little holes in the floor go a very, very long way down. There's like really no sense with how far they go. We're in the room, and Finnan's kind of investigating the bodies of these cultists, and he finds a small silver pendant with the symbol of a key on it. Nobody knows what this is, and nobody knows what it's of. But he finds it in the room and pockets it for a moment and says, "Oh, what's this?" And we decide to look at it later. So at that point, Spooky is asked to make a wisdom saving throw, which she fails, and her pants tighten on her, and there's this dazzling light that almost blinds us, and we all have to make wisdom saving throws. This light radiates out from the pants, and it illuminates the spiral, brightening from the table. So it's pretty safe to say that her pants are linked to the Chained Oblivion or Tharizdun in some way. Spooky has to make another wisdom save, and there's the spell that she found in the enchanting table's desk talks of a bloodletting spell, essentially, where you can transfer blood from a non-necessarily willing creature into another. So it's almost like you can heal people, is how she's putting it, but it's not necessarily willingly. But when she does this, when she has to make this wisdom save that she fails, the 2 golden needles extend from her fingers, and she goes to make movement towards the person closest to her. And as that happens, Callie, she asks, like, "Help me take off my pants. I need to take these off. I need to take the pants off now." So Callie tries to help her, but she gets nicked by these golden needles. And there's the blood drips from Callie's hand and hits the floor, and it's this sickly yellow light, and everyone takes necrotic damage, and this energy seems to spiral through the floor and up into the pants, giving Spooky's pants that are originally just black and white this yellow thin stripe to them. So as of this point, Finnan picks up Spooky, pants and all, and they just run. He runs and he takes her out of the temple, and they run. Neppy like drops to her knees and asks her goddess what to do, and she asks Nephthisiket if she should stay and hallow the ground, and Nephthisiket says yes, and she asks if Nephthisiket knows anything about the Chained Oblivion, and she says no, and she asks if she should stay on the path with Blackwater and return to Philenis, her home, or if her goddess has another mission for her, and her goddess says your path is your own, but still wishes her to hallow this place. So Neppy has to sleep, and then it'll take her a full 24 hours to hallow the ground, and a lot of oils and incense and all that kind of good stuff. So Finnan takes Spooky out of the tower, and he casts Dispel Curse, or Remove Curse, and so she's able to take the pants off, and that's where they stay, is off, so she puts another pair of pants on, of course. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens while Neppy is hallowing. It's 24 hours worth of stuff, so I'll go through that in a sec. But while Neppy's inside the temple, she, with Clack's help and with Finnan's help a little bit. No, if it is Finnan come back in, no, it's Clack. So Clack and Finnan come in, and they help her destroy the altar. And then she spends the next 24 hours. There's a lot of chanting that happens, likely in Infernal. She removes all the symbols of Tharizdun in the room. They collapse the holes in the floor to prevent any blood from falling through, and she puts up symbols of her goddess and casts the spell Hallow and makes it so that if there are any dead that are interred here, they can never be made undead. It's something called everlasting rest, and the sense is that. So while that's happening, so that's the next 24 hours. After she finishes, it seems like while they're outside, the rest of the group is outside, or people are kind of popping in and out to lend help where they can and check on Neppy while she's doing everything, and put Spooky's pants in the bag. Well, they don't actually bring the pants back inside. No, they wait till Neppy comes out with the bag. But anyway, the woods are fairly quiet and animals tend to steer clear of the tower. But yeah, so while this is happening, Finnan takes a look at the key pendant, and there's this faint magical essence from it, and he's curious about that. While that's happening, Letters comes up to him, and after the end of last session, which had caused Finnan to kind of storm off through the Alda Gate, first Letters apologizes for open palm smacking him across the face, and very calmly asks if Finnan has a death wish, and why he's so eager to throw his life away, and encouraging him that we care and that we're here for him, and that letting him know that if he goes off on his own, that we'll all follow, and that we would do anything to keep him alive, and he just wants people safe, and Finnan worries that people just look at him and see someone young, and and he puts himself in harm's way because better him than anyone else, and he hasn't been with us long, so it's less important. And Letters encourages him that that's not true, and that we care and that we're here for him. Finnan feels like he should take the brunt of the damage, and Letters tells him that he's really brave, but and Finnan sometimes worries that if he takes the time to talk through everything, as we are often wont to do, people will just see him as a kid and gloss over him. And Letters delivers this beautiful line of that sometimes it's the thinking about things that makes you a man. So, yeah, and so Letters and Finnan spend this wonderful moment after a while, then sitting down to try and figure out what the deal is with this necklace. So they try. The Letters takes a look at it, and he gets the sense that there's some magical illusion enchantment to it, and that there might be a code word or a phrase that activates the illusion. So they spend hours, 6-7 hours doing that, and finally realize that the necklace disappears when they say the word barrier. So they have this necklace that has some mild illusion magic on it that disappears and reappears when you say the word barrier. Callie and Kokanee spend time to read some of Torn's book and learn some of the rituals around Arathis, and as Callie keeps working to teach Kokanee about that and translate, and so Kokanee can become proficient in his religion, and they learn some of the language of the Caraxians' High Tongue. Spooky and Kokanee talk a bit about Kokanee's life, and Spooky is like, hey, you never told me that if you don't send things back to the Sultan, that you'll die. And Kokanee, basically is like, well, it wouldn't be the first time. And Spooky says, I was gonna give you the pants, but I don't think that's a good idea now. She talks about wanting to be Yana, still be herself, but she knows the pants are cursed. And she wants to be called, after everything is done in Barmwich, she wants to be called Yana again, and wants to be herself again. Spooky, Neppy finally at this point where Neppy emerges, and they notice is kind of there's this calmness that seeps over the woods, and the animals are starting to come back and through, and Neppy on her way out talks to Finnan about the armor and just wanting to keep him safe, and her worry that the last time somebody tried to do something with a piece of armor or weapon from someone exceedingly dangerous. Callie took damage, and it could have hurt her. And she talks 2 letters about his drumming, that if he ever does accompany her, or they end up going to her temple, that the priestesses there know how to throw a decent party, and his drum circle would be probably pretty welcome there. Spooky asks Kokanee about Bacall and his home life, and that it's beautiful, and if you have money, and as most places are, and you have a decent, setting for yourself, but he doesn't miss it for obvious reasons. She asks more about his life, and he gives her his Bible to read, the book that he's been writing since he's become the High Priest of Arathis. So he gives her that information and lets her read it. Kokanee asks her how old she is. As a gnome, he's never really been sure. So she's 60, which is about middle-aged for a gnome, I think. So he asks her a little bit about her life in Barmwich, and she talks about how her dad wanted her to go into magic because that was his business, and her mom wanted to go into the Royal Guard, which was her line of work, but she ended up in politics and like local government and wanting to make things better. She caught Fildo and Cora rigging an election in Barmwich, and they found out that she knew, and charged her with treason, I think it was, and made her a fugitive, so she went on the run, and her mother is now in indentured servitude, and her father is in a prison somewhere. So she knows that Fildo's always been persuasive and a prominent figure, and his interest in politics came in quickly because he's always kind of had a penchant for music and talking to people, but interesting. So there's definitely some shadiness in his backstory. And Neppy talks to Finnan about this new ability he has to see through walls, and encourages him to use that with a sense of propriety. And Finnan doesn't really realize what she's talking about, which is a funny moment between everyone. Neppy casts sending to Kamea again, just to check in on how things are going, and lets her know, Kamea lets her know that it'll be 3 days to when Cora is crowned queen, when Fildo arrives and the Glitter Guard arrive, basically, and her hands are tied at this point. We as a group kind of talk about what we can do to keep Kamea safe and to keep Jar safe, and Finnan remembers an old friend of his who could help them get out of the city if things were to go really south. Once Spooky talks a lot about what happened in Barmwich after Fildo took power, that when he did, things kind of really ratcheted up, that dissidents went missing. There was this kind of wave of unease and uncertainty throughout the town, and if people went missing, sometimes they never came back, or they either fell into line, and there was a lot of uncertainty about who to trust. The Glitter Guard kind of morphed into this, rather than not a royal guard, but a local guard, but as everyone had to serve in the military in Barmwich at some point, it went into this kind of secret police that people were essentially like narking on other people, and people would be investigated. So I sent to Kamea once more, letting her know that Finnan's friend Arturo Vaneth can get them out, if necessary. The little lordling needs a favor, I believe was the phrase. Or if the little lordling needs a favor, so to tell Vaneth, and to encourage Kamea to play along, to stay safe as much as she can. Kamea says that the city seems okay, and she'll do her best to play along, and she'll keep Jar safe, and that they have some friends in high places if things are to turn really poorly. So we bed down for the evening, and it's a pretty quiet night. in the morning we wake and it's this fresh smell. No more rain at this point. It's a newer day. And we head towards Barmwich by way of Hartsville. So we spend a day traveling. It's this beautiful forest. We travel and see lots of animals, and it's definitely a different sense to the place that we had just come from within the tower. Spooky and Finn lead the way, and on the path just outside of what we assume to be Hartsvale, we see this large figure kind of stooped down in a green robe, brown pats with like a leather satchel. He's a darker skin, kind of a bluish hint to it, and a broad flat nose. We know he's a furbolg after meeting Yelnik in Alderwood, who was also a furbolg, and his name is Bayhorn. He's about 6'8", big guy, and he's going to lead us back to the village, simply because he's just like a nice dude, and has a great accent as well. So the village is kind of a ring of thatched houses, seems primarily furbolg, and they've it's a pretty simple. There's a couple bigger houses or like a communal table for food and stuff like that. Bayhorn talks about his brother Vaern, who was an adventurer, and it seems that we're the adventuring type, and these furbolgs were displaced. They were originally from Guthstram, which is a continent to the far north, I believe, who fled after a war that had broken out there 50 years ago, and raged for some time. So they came to the continent of Wolfar, but they were originally from Guthstram up north. Bayhorn, Spooky talks to him for a moment, and he recognizes her voice, and talks that she sounds just like a bard who came through here named Lemon Fable. Spooky's, which was actually an alter ego of Spooky, so she came through under a name, and Bayhorn talks about how she tried her best, but she wasn't a good bard, and doesn't seem to clock that it was her, but talks a lot about Lemon Fable. Everyone talks about what we're going to do, whether we're going to stay here in Hartsvale, and Bayhorn offers us lodgings and seems to be just like a decently nice guy, and then all of a sudden somebody starts talking about smack about someone else, and then Letters and Bayhorn are now going to fight. So that's where we ended off episode 44. Neppy mid attempting to talk to Chi if we can bounce to the airplane and then bounce to Barmwich rather than take the whole week of travel, which will take us a day. But it seems that Letters and Bayhorn are probably going to have to throw down first. So next episode is Saturday, September 14th in the evening, joined by a very special guest. Going to be real fun, who is not reprising her role as Chi, but will be creating another role specifically for beta campaign. So I've been told. So love you guys. No, this one was an extra long, but I took a lot of notes and this was a long session. Love you guys, and is it Saturday yet? Hello everyone, and welcome to the episode 45 recap of Blackwater from the session happening September 14th, 2019, and the episode titled Staying Afloat. So we open in the town of Hartsvale with Letters and Bayhorn, the furbolg, getting into a serious fisticuffs, which draws the attention of the town, with people betting and giving some, a break up to the monotony of small village life. It's essentially a war of attrition as they fight through, as Bayhorn is a barbarian and Letters is a beefy wizard, but a wizard nonetheless. Finnan heals Letters twice, much to Sean Deppner's chagrin, but the rest of us don't notice it because he can do it without any of us noticing. So during the fight, Verti the Tortle comes up and relays us a message from Chi, that Chi has been healing and recovering, but that she could be of aid if we needed. Verti casts hold person on Bayhorn to tell them to break up the fight, and she doesn't understand this, this hormones and needing to do this, it seems all a waste of time, but Bayhorn breaks out of the hold and they finish their fight. Bayhorn ends up knocking Letters out with a couple pretty serious punches, not before Letters does do some pretty intense damage with Steelwind Strike. At the end of it, Bayhorn gives him a healing potion to bring him back, and then someone heals him, and they go get a drink together, which turns out to be some pretty intense moonshine. Callie takes 3 shots of moonshine altogether. She vomits the first one, champs the second one, and then vomits the third one. Finnan takes the first one and then vomits the final 2, and both of them are quite drunk at this point. Letters just takes his one and champs it out, of course. And then there's also mead, so the rest of us have some mead. Where we talked to Verti a little bit about what's going on up in Barmwich, and she says that the town is a bit on edge, that she's a trader and trading has been slow or dry, and they're not. And the folks in Hartsvale tell us that they're not really accustomed or wanting of outsiders. But there's a path that if we're going to travel to Barmwich, we can either go by the road, which is a bit shorter, I think something like 6 days, 7 days, through the forest, which is safer, essentially, but longer, so 9 days, or Verity tells us that we can take a trip on an underground river, which is an old turtle system that is well used by turtles over the years, but secret. So we decide to leave quickly because we know that in a couple days Cora is going to be coronated in Wolfreen as queen. And if y'all excuse me just for a moment, I will be right back, but Minx is being a piece of crap, so 1 sec. Okay, I'm back. She's truly a trash animal. So we decide to leave quickly, and Neppy, much to Callie and Finnan's chagrin, casts Lesser Restoration on them both to have them at their best. And Callie makes a point of saying she doesn't want to go into the same boat as Neppy, and so we finally decide who is in whose boat, as Verity has a boat, and we have the folding boat as well. So in Verity's boat are Verity, Kokanee, Letters, and Clack, and in the boat, the other boat, we have Neppy, Callie, Finnan, and Spooky, with Verity's boat going first. So we head down into a kind of covered cabin. We travel down, and for quite a while, for about half an hour, we move underground at a slow descent, and we find an underground river. We ask Verity what's in the water, and she says that she's heard stories, but she said don't put your hand in it. She's never lost a limb, but she knows people who have. So the cave is slick and covered with moss and vegetation, and the water is quite brackish. So we can't really see much, and it's pitch black down here. So our boats are kind of tethered together, and they're heading downstream. So on our first day, the first day kind of passes without too much interruption, and we press on into the night. The front boat expects there's some dips and bumps all of a sudden, and then 4 reptilian heads rise up out of the water, snapping the rope between the 2 boats, getting a surprise round on us, and this is a hydra. And then we fight. The fight goes, the hydra is trying to break the boats. It's going for the people and in the boats and trying to bite them, but it's mostly trying to capsize the boat. So the first boat gets a couple big hits in on it, and a wave moves to rock the boat, and the boat is starting to take on water. And so Finnan ends up at the end of the fight killing the hydra as we start cauterizing the heads with magic rather than slicing them off, because they'll bring a couple more heads back up. The boat starts to collapse as it careens into the side of the current being so strong, it careens into the side of the cavern. In that boat, Verity, Kokanee, Letters, and Clack try to grab onto the cave wall. Verity is able to, or it doesn't, and Finnan dives into the water to attempt to help them, and Callie's flying at this point to try and get them over. Finnan is able to cast Fly on, I believe it's Verity and Kokanee, who are able to kind of get them into safety.
so that they're able to get into our boat. And then Callie grabs Clack, and Letters is able to get into the boat. Spooky pulls out a new boat off of her robe of useful items, and then this kind of shelf thing that we're on, we decide to rest here for the night. We collapse the inflatable boat, or not the inflatable boat, the portable boat, and Neppy puts it back in her bag, and we rest on this like ledge for the evening. First watch is Callie and Neppy. It's pretty calm. There's some natural ledges in the cave where it shows, and as we take a look into the water, there's these larger openings where the water seems to rush down into deep lower caverns, branching in and out. Where do these caverns go? I don't know, but it can't be good. It just can't, because they're going deep down underground, and that's never good. On second watch, Kokanee and Spooky, Kokanee sees this bluish white glow down the end of the cavern that seems to be popping in and out, and pops closer and then further away. It is above the water, not below, but it's definitely seems, and it's up, elevated off the wall, but it seems to be popping in and out, but keeps disappearing. I hate my cat. 1 second. Okay, and we're back. So after they kind of see these popping of this, whatever it is, in and out, this like bright white bluish glow, Kokanee decides to send the bone devil jaw back. He takes it out of the bag of holding that Neppy has unawares, and not slicing himself on the spines, and then completes the ritual to send it back wherever he sends things back to. So then we have the third watch, which is Letters and Finnan, and they kind of take a long look down the end of the hallway, as Spooky and Kokanee had pointed out the bluish white glow, and they realize that there's this silvery webbing kind of going back and forth between the cavern, and they just start sending eldritch blasts and firebolts down the hallway to burn the webbing, which they assume is a spider of some description, kind of popping, this bluish white popping in and out, and then not reappearing again. So we wake on the second day, and then we take the larger of our boat, the folding boat in front, or the portable boat, and then in the front boat we have Neppy, Finnan, Spooky, Clack, and Kokanee, and in the rowboat towing behind we have Letters, Callie, and Verity. Verity turtles for a while and just goes in her shell, but we manage to steer the boat we row through this webs, the current taking us down, but it seems like we've burned all the webs away, and if there were spiders there, they are there no longer. Finnan keeps an eye on the water, but since he's looking so much at the water, he seems to avoid the sense of stalactites looking down, and as he does, these tentacles reach out and try and encompass him, and are with the front boat, they end up, there's one roper drops down in front of Finnan, one on the left hand side, one on the right hand side. The ones on the left and right end up scooping up Spooky and Kokanee and lifting them off the boat, and they're both grappled. So we fight the ropers, and we make decent work of them. Verity summons 2 gargoyles, which keep the 2 back ones busy as Spooky and Kokanee are freed, and we get them back in the boat. And as the boats keep traveling forward, we focus on the last one. The last one picks up Neppy, and has her grappled and restrained, trying to eat her, and Verity ends up casting Insect Plague, killing the last one, and also getting Neppy stuck in the process. Lots of bee stings, but everyone is fine. We decide to push through the night. As we've been awake for about 36 hours at this point, we've all suffered a level of exhaustion. We come to the end and find the remnants of what looks like a camp, where people would either prepare to leave or prepare to stop as they end this kind of leg of their journey. So we push up through and we walk through this tunnel that leads up, working our way out of the cave system, taking our leaving the rowboat down, or bringing the rowboat up with us if we can, and collapsing the portable boat and putting it back in our bag. We make our way out into the edge of the forest, and we're in a pretty dense forest at this point, but about 400 feet away, we see this wooden wall with glitter guard surrounding it, and we find a place to hunker down for the night, but not before Clack asks Spooky what we think is out on a date, wanting to go get a drink sometime, but we're really not sure what Spooky answers. Is kind of a little bit lost in the hubbub of the end of session. We decide to bed down for the night with Glitter Guard patrolling around us, and that is where we ended. Our next session will be Saturday the 21st. Also, happy birthday, Jenny. Love you so much, and it was so lovely to celebrate with y'all last night, and love y'all, and thanks for listening. And is it Saturday yet? Hello, everyone. Welcome to your episode 46 recap for Blackwater. That happened on September 21st, 2019. Apologies for the delay. It has been a busy week. This episode I have titled Broaching Barmwich. Okay, so before we bedded down for the evening, we open that the group Blackwater is in the woods outside of Barmwich. We're like 500 feet into the tree line. We can see the wall and we can see some glitter guard kind of walking, but they don't see us. So Neppy takes a moment to scry on Cora, and she sees that she's standing in this beautiful light blue dress with gold embroidery and filigree, a light blue train. She's looking in the mirror, kind of adjusting, and she smiles and she says, "This is it. This is the moment we've been waiting for. I knew this day would come." So she inspects her jewelry and is kind of going through her outfits to choose for her coronation, and then the scry fades, and that is all Neppy sees. She then tries to scry on Fildo, and it fails. So she's unsure of where he is, whether he's in the city or not. The sense is that Cora is in Wolframe. So Neppy then tries to cast sending to Yana's mom, and it fails. And we try and discuss how to get into the city. So we know that there's a couple people that we could potentially try and get in contact with. Peplum, who's a scribe. So we in the village, there's Annalyn Stonebrook, who's a clerk. There's a tavern owner named Falric Stillpeak, and then Riola and Egan Coldcloud, which are parents of Yana's friend Yeren, who died. And then there's Garmo, who is Spooky's uncle. So I cast Neppy cast sending to Peplum, because she's met him, so she knows him, and it will go through. That he says that he's in the Brightkeep village, but there's something different about the scry. It's almost as if Neppy feels like she is being watched, or someone else is listening, which is very new and weird. There's the sense that Yana's mother is being kept in the Brightkeep. So we talk for a while about how we're going to try and get her parents out, and what we're going to need to do. Do we kidnap Fildo? Do we fight him? A lot of ideas are tossed around, but the eventuality is we don't want anyone to die. We don't want to kill anybody. We just want to get her parents out, but we're kind of unsure how to do that. We're pretty unprepared to deal with a bard, or someone who could have mind control powers. So we take a first watch, watching the lights along the top of the wall kind of go on as the evening comes to a close. Kokanee and Neppy take first watch. On second watch is Callie and Letters, and Callie asks Letters about helping him when she goes to propose to Kamea, with a skywrite saying, "Kamea, will you marry me?" Something along those lines. Third watch is Finnan and Spooky, and they talk a little bit, and Clack is there as well, and in a roundabout way asks Spooky out on a date of some description, but they don't. But Yana definitely brushes it off, and Clack doesn't really get the memo. So in the morning, Neppy tries to cast sending again to Yana's mother, and she says, "I can't talk," and that's it. And it's the same sense as with Peplum, that there is somebody watching. We decide to take a kind of, sorry, the baby was just moving. I'm doing this while she's on her nap. We decide to kind of take a roundabout way around the village to try and avoid the wall. We discuss kind of potentially going in, and it just doesn't really fly. It just doesn't seem like a good idea because we don't really have a way to sneak in or stealth in. So we go around near towards the lake, which is on the other side of Barmwich, which is kind of a horseshoe shape around the edge of this lake, and we find this small homestead, kind of a log cabin. We walk up to down the front path. Letters, Spooky, and Neppy all are unable to get out of the way as a net kind of whoosh and like pulls them up into the trees. Kokanee and Callie are able to roll out of the way. And a voice comes from a tree. We see a glint of metal and a cloaked figure, kind of camouflaged. It's a halfling with a long bow. He asks us to like put down our weapons. Who are we? Why are we here? And he says that one of us is able to come in, and Neppy goes in to kind of speak for the group and talk to him a little bit. So we approach the homestead, and the figure is in this ghillie suit, essentially, with a longbow. He's a halfling. His name is Horlin, and we go inside. Neppy and he talk for a bit about why they're here, and she wants to get some information, and she realizes she has a sense that he hates the thorn gauges as well. It turns out he used to be a glitter guard, but as the city kind of went to the wayside, he no longer decided to participate in the glitter guard. His set of armor is mounted on the wall. He talks of a prison that is below the Bright Keep, but there's another one apparently, and he talks about there's this sense of being watched, that the closer you get to the keep, the stronger it is. He tells us that we could potentially enter the city through the lake through one of the fishing boats, and he talks that his son, Coramin, is in the glitter guard. And so if anything happens, like not to hurt him, gives us a picture, and Neppy promises that she'll do her best to try and get him to come home. So he leads us towards the coast, and we get into the foldable boat. Horland fires kind of a flare arrow, and we sail up to the ship that's on the lake, that's about 20 feet long. And the captain, his name is Talk. He's a gnome, and Horland asks him for a favor. So we're down in the hold, downstairs, and Neppy, Kokanee, Spooky, and Letters rest, and Finnan and Callie and Clack stay up. So when we get to the lakeside, we all will essentially need to hide because Talk needs to talk to the guards to basically say like, hey, there's just fish down there, there's nothing else in there. So we give him some gold. The hatch opens, the guards don't notice us there. Talk comes down, tells us, okay, you can get off the boat now. We've done our best. So we try and disguise ourselves. Neppy is turned into a cat, a little black cat. Letters is a close approximation to a furbolg. Yana disguised Kokanee disguises himself as another human, and Callie is not disguised, I don't think. I don't remember. So we go to a tavern owned by a friend of Spooky's in what's called the Hearts Ward, which is the kind of an upper middle class neighborhood. There's more guards here. 3 of them wander up to us and take Kokanee's sword. They're like, hey, what is... outsiders have to turn in their weapons. So he, of course, gives them his sword, as he can resummon it back, no problem. So we go to this Still Peak distillery, and we head inside, and behind the bar is Felric, who is a friend of Yana's father's, and so turns out this distillery makes gin. Kokanee and Spooky met in this distillery when they were both pretty drunk, I think, is when they met originally, some 5 years before. So Neppy is made to do cat tricks by Letters, and it's pretty pretty funny for most people, pretty demeaning for her, but she does them anyway, for a saucer of milk and an anchovy, so of course. So Spooky puts a letter in Felric's hand. It basically says, hey, like, just to let him know that it's us, or it's her, and he says that he'll come check and do room service, or he'll turn down the rooms for us and come up at 6 o'clock. So we go up to the rooms upstairs, and Felric comes up pretty quickly, and he's like, oh, I just couldn't wait. And he comes to see Yana. Turns out that the bounty on her head is at 80,000 gold pieces, and Kokanee's is at 50,000 gold pieces because he accosted a guard, punched him, split a guard's lip while he was drunk. And this guard has now become a captain, so he has it out for Kokanee Buckwild. So Felric tells us that things are different. People don't go out much. His bar has been blacklisted, essentially. Everyone pretty much keeps to themselves. Nobody goes out. Felric discusses that people are really, really afraid that something bad is going to happen to them or their families, and that people are missing. People are getting kind of disappeared. And if they are dissenting against the Thorn Gauges, Vildo, they go away for a couple days and then they come back and then they fall in line. Felric talks about Spooky's uncle Garmo as well, that he's not doing well. A few weeks ago, he was seen in the gold slums and didn't know who Felric was, that he was pretty mentally unwell, and that he had lost an eye. So we decide to stay for the night, and Felric provides us with rooms, which we pay for, and he warns us to be careful. Talks us about that the captains have this kind of fealty ritual within the Glitter Guard, so that they're pretty devout to the regime, I suppose, or the governance of Fildo. So we buy some. Felric says that his brewery is suffering. The distillery is suffering. So we buy 3 casks of ale, 2 casks of cider, and 5 casks of gin, and have them delivered to Kamea's house in Wolfreen, and help give him a bit of money for that to help keep him running, and as a small token of thanks for keeping us safe for the night. Before Spooky begins to catch up with Felric, and they just chat and stuff, and then the topic of marriage is briefly broached, and Neppy goes, what's that? What is marriage? So she learns through a very convoluted explanation by Letters, and some slight adjustments by Callie and Kokanee, about what marriage is, and they learn that Callie wants to propose to Kamea and talk about how she wants to do that, and Clack talks about how he knows what marriage is, and talks about how he would be true and would promise himself, etc., to Spooky, and which kind of flies over her head, or if she does notice, she ignores it. So Neppy now knows what marriage is after not knowing what that was before at all, because why would a priestess who knows a whole bunch of things about death, and that's what her whole order does, why would you need to know anything about marriage? At the end of, before bedding down for the evening or going to our respective rooms, I think Callie and Spooky rooming Clack, and does Clack have his own room? Maybe, I don't know. Letters and Finnan share a room. Kokanee and Neppy share a room. Kokanee and Letters take a moment with Clack to gently give him some pointers about how to go about courting someone, not necessarily proposing marriage before you've ever been on a date with someone. Both of them very much wealths of knowledge on that topic. And that is where we left it for the evening. So our next session will be on October 5th, so whatever the Saturday is, I think, 7:15, our house. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and is it Saturday yet? Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 48 recap of The Adventures of Blackwater for the session held on October 5th, 2019. The actual, high fantasy title of this will be Beware the Rats, but the more appropriate title is Callie did 69 damage in one turn. So congratulations, Lennon, for that. Okay, so the session starts off where we all wake up after an afternoon kind of nap or sleep, a full rest, a long rest in the Still Peak Distillery, which run by Fulric after the reunion with Yana and Fulric, and we all go into Letters and Finnan and Clack's room. Finnan is doing push-ups. Clack is carving something, but we can't quite see what it is, and they're in the process of getting ready, so we're just trying to talk about what our plan is for the day. And so Kokanee outlines a plan to potentially see if we can not necessarily just prison break to release everyone out of the prison, but to steal it and to commandeer it so that we can utilize the people inside the prison to start not a rebellion potentially, and that involves a plan of reconnaissance and kind of seeing what's going on in the town. And we're talking about potentially a week plan. The group kind of hums and haws about this, and we think that this is kind of the only option we have, is to something to get started. And as this is going, Neppy tries to convince Spooky to put her pants, the spooky pants, back on. That she was doing some thinking about it, and while the pants were dangerous and did cause, a lot of damage in the Temple of Tharazdun, Neppy's reasoning was that the pants are better on her than in the bag of holding, which could be taken at any moment if someone took Neppy. And because of the god that the pants belong to, she has faith in Spooky that she can master them, and that as long as they are far away from temples of Tharazdun, she should be okay. Should being the operative word there. So Spooky and Kokanee, being the only two that can really fully disguise themselves, decide to go to do reconnaissance. Spooky disguises herself in a disguise kit, and Kokanee alters herself to look like a Thurbolg, and they decide to go to the gold slums because they had heard that Spooky's uncle Garmo was living in the gold slums, kind of essentially homeless or and not well, and had lost an eye. So they travel through the Hartsward toward the gold slums. Nobody is out, which is strange, which is different than Spooky remembers it being a lively town before the Thorn Gauges took over. But this is a new level of curfew that they hadn't seen before. So they make it to the gold slums unaccosted. But as they're getting into the gold slums, a poor stealth check means one of them knocks over a barrel. They hear the clinking of armor running towards them, and then the padding of footsteps running away from them. So they both simultaneously try to follow the footsteps and then hide from the guard, with Spooky hiding their tracks with prestidigitation in the mud behind them. So they manage to lose the guard, noticing that there's very few livestock around in places where there should be livestock. They reach an alley following the footsteps, and they see this figure who has a mop of kind of gray-black hair and a cloak that looks well tattered and ruined, and the figure looks over at them, and he has one eye. His left eye is missing, and it's Garmo. And Spooky reveals herself to be who she is Yana. And Garmo goes, no, you can't be here, you can't be here. And Spooky says, well, can we talk to you? And he asks to talk how? They don't quite understand the question, but they say using their voices, and Garmo replies with, that's what they said. Garmo keeps telling them, you have to leave, it's too late, nothing can be done, they'll get in your head. They said that his brain was too weak, and they took his eye, and that's how they work, that's how they see. And he said to beware of the rats. Spooky uses her detect magic to find out that someone has tampered with Garmo's memory. It's a type of magic that she's unfamiliar with. It's not any necessarily school of magic that she knows. It's essentially like the spell Modify Memory, but something is different about it that makes it not necessarily an arcane spell. So what she does is she dispels magic on him at using a 5th level spell slot and succeeds. Garmo takes a moment and he says, this can't be right. He mentions incubators and hosts, and when he was in prison, they took him through a wall in the prison, and they took his eye. He doesn't remember what they look like. He just wanted to know where they took Spooky's parents, where the prison was, her father and her mother. After giving, he's unable to really provide any more information, his mind being still a bit too muddled. So they give him some food, and they leave. They stealth back. A group of guards looks familiar to them. The guards that had been chasing them previously, one of them with a captain. So they run and they round a corner, and Kokanee uses the Cape of the Mountain Bank to dimension door back to just outside the Still Peak Distillery. They make it inside unencumbered. So they get inside and relay everything that happened, everything that Garmo said, and Neppy asks about which eye Garmo was that had been taken, knowing that the folks who follow Vecna also usually have an eye missing, but it's not. It's the other. His eye is the other one that's missing, so it's not related to Vecna. And they think for a moment about what they mean about incubators and hosts, and Neppy racks her brain for history about what she might have read, and she knows that there's creatures who use other creatures as hosts for offspring, and creatures from outer planes. And as she kind of racks through, she puts 2 and 2 together about what they're saying about speaking into somebody's mind, using telepathy, essentially, and realizes that they're speaking about Illithid, or mind flayers, psionic, powerful creatures who live in the Underdark and tend to enslave other races and possess exceedingly powerful mental abilities. She doesn't know a lot, but she knows that. As they're coming to this conclusion, still kind of reeling from that revelation, trying to figure out if the people if Fildo is a mind flayer, or what is going on, or if there are mind flayer who are acting in tandem to this. There's a bang outside the Still Peak Distillery, and the 3 guards that had been chasing Kokanee and Spooky have caught up to them. So Fulric comes upstairs, and he says, you better hide or leave, or fight. And so we run down to the cellar to hide. One of the guards upstairs, Fulric, says, they're not here. I don't know what you're talking about. And one of the guards hits Fulric, knocking him down. The 3 guards kind of make their way down to the basement. And we all do our best to hide. Letters uses the blink spell to blink out of existence right before somebody would see him. And we all do decently well hiding. So they don't see us, but they go back upstairs and begin to arrest Fulric. And so that's not okay for us. So someone kicks over a barrel downstairs to draw them down, and we start a fight, a loud one. Callie acts first on a surprise round, cutting the back of the legs of one of the guards that comes downstairs. They are, fighting. 2 of the guards start to come down the stairs to fight those of us downstairs, and Letters blinks upstairs to start fighting the captain, who is up there, noticing also that when they hit us with their swords, their blades do not only slashing damage, but psychic damage as well, which is strange, but not when you think about what's happening later. Spooky casts a spell. She casts Blight on one of the captain, I believe, and when she does so, her spell, her magic that used to glow a red or a darker colors now tends to glow this kind of sickly yellow, and the face of the captain for a minute desiccates and becomes wrinkled as if, aged and mummified by time as the spell takes effect for him. The captain, Letters, knocks the captain of the guard down the stairs, and at this point the Blackwater is still basically being okay, we don't want to kill these people, we just want to incapacitate them so that we can leave and see if we can figure out what's happening. But so Letters knocks two of the guards and the captain, one guard and one captain down the stairs, and so everyone kind of ends up in a pile with Spooky at the bottom of it. Neppy manages to hold her ground at the base of the stairs before everyone kind of comes tumbling afterwards. And so the last one of the guards is unconscious on the ground, and the other guard is not far from it. So the captain also goes unconscious. Neppy casts Spare the Dying on both of them, so to see if they could just, stabilize them so that they can have some time to leave. But then the captain's head starts to twitch, and his head explodes. And a creature that walks on four kind of clawed paws, and it looks essentially like a giant brain, crawls out of this thing's skull, which is, we don't know the name for it, but they're called Intellect Devourers. So it makes an attack on Callie, doing psychic damage and attempts to take her mind, and she resists it. So we manage to kill the Intellect Devourer. The captain is dead, and we essentially bring back the two soldiers and tell them to stand down. And Letters and Neppy play good cop, bad cop, respectively, with Neppy playing bad cop probably for the first time in her life and doing an okay job of it. Letters encouraging her along. The soldiers have no idea what's going on. They're pretty shaken. Letters offers them some gin to help calm their nerves. And they discuss how the captains have to do this fealty ritual, which is what their sense is about why the Intellect Devourers are in their head. Potentially the Illithid, the Mind Flayers, insert these brains, these Intellect Devourers into their heads. The guards, we take away their weapons from them, and as we do so, they have psychic damage done to them. They take damage. There's magic on their armor that keeps it gleaming, so it's just like a clean, glittery, chromy magic. But the swords are not magic anymore. It seems to be some sort of bond, a tethering between the sword and the person. So we don't know if anyone had heard us. So Kokanee goes outside to take a peek and sees a rat. He notices that the rat, he rolls an exceedingly good perception check, and he notices that the rat has a little bump on the top of its head. He can't quite see what, but he casts silence, and using his gun, he shoots the rat and kills it, potentially staving off something that could have been very bad, as Garmo had warned us. We talked to the guards a little bit, tying them up. They didn't know their captains were hosts, and so we asked them some questions about, there's a curfew, an hour past sundown. There's nobody allowed in the streets, especially in the gold slums. If you're out past curfew in the Bright Keep village, you're generally likely a person of note, but out in the gold slums, that's not good. So the officers live in the Bright Keep village, and we ask of Coramin, Horlin's daughter, his son, Horlin being the halfling man, ex-glitter guard who helped us get here. And our new plan is to break into the prison and have these two guards, Gordo and Pipkin, take us into the prison and essentially get us processed and inside. And so we're trying to figure out how to do that. So we go, as they're looking at everyone, Pipkin and Gordo recognize Spooky by means of her pants. And they talk about how Fildo hates Spooky and would do anything to see her under his thumb or dead or something along those lines. And Spooky says she's not hiding anymore, and she means business. And so Neppy takes a moment to, after her playing of bad cop and then not apologizing, but basically being like, I had to, get information out of you and all that kind of stuff. She prays to Nepthiseket, asking Gordo and for Pipkin to be safe if they do end up dead, because essentially they're traitors to the Glitter Guard at this point. A lack of loyalty is met often with execution, and that's just the way that it goes. Or being a traitor is met with execution. So Neppy sends a message to Horlin to 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 essentially find these two guards and welcome them into his fold of folks who have dissented and are trying to stay alive, essentially, on the outskirts of Barmwich. Kokanee prays to Arathis. It's a real "Are you there, Arathis? It's me, Kokanee" moment, which is very lovely. Spooky takes a moment to speak to Garl Glittergold, the halfling god, asking him to buck up and get his shit together. And where has he been this whole time, letting this shit happen in his city? Callie asks for safety from Melora. Vinin asks his deity, which we've appropriately named Dave, at this point, for guidance. Clack is praying to Groombar. It's like this wonderful carving, etching ritual of a wolf. He will not show anyone what he's carving in this stone. Callie tries to persuade him, but he doesn't tell her. And at the end, Letters, seeing Neppy praying, actually takes a moment to ask Nepthisiket if to have Nepthisiket take a special watch over Neppy, because Neppy doesn't look after herself, which was very sweet. Yeah, and so we do all that. There's a bunch of praying. It's great, and we, as I said, Neppy sends a message to Horlin, advising him of the new recruits. And during that sending, that creeping sense comes back to Neppy. She realizes that before, it was not necessarily that they were listening in on her. They were listening in on the other folks that she was sending to, Spooky's mother and Peplum, the scribe of Fildo Thorngage that Spooky used to know. But now they're listening in on her. So we try to figure out how to get into the prison, and we take a moment to be like, okay, well, if Callie is the only one, so one of us, we realize one of us has to hold the bag of holding because it has all of our stuff in it. The rest of us have the ability to, Kokanee can summon his weapons. Spooky doesn't need any physical weapons. She can just cast spells. Letters the same. Neppy doesn't need weapons. She has magic. Finnan can summon his spear, but Callie can't do that. So we decide, after much deliberation, to give her the bag of holding and polymorph her into a rat, so that if she is caught, or if she's following us, then she will have all her stuff, and all it would take for Spooky to drop concentration, and then she would have all of her stuff and be ready to go. So the two guards who are now on our side, Gordo and Pipkin, they parade us through the city, essentially towards the Bright Keep. Then the closer you get to the Bright Keep, there's this creeping sense that we're being followed, and that we're being watched by rats or something else. It's this creeping presence, as if something is standing right behind you, but then you turn around and it's not there. There's a number of guards out front of the Bright Keep, and there's a series of guards and checks that we go through to bring us in. 2 extra guards fall in behind with Gordo and Pipkin at the front. We go inside, and we look upstairs, and in the main kind of entry room of the Bright Keep, there's a beautiful second floor with this set of large bright red doors that lead to the living quarters of the Bright Keep, where likely the chambers of Fildo and Cora were before Cora took up residence in Wolfreen. And then, fun fact, we kind of remember at that moment, oh yeah, there's a bunch of captains in Wolfreen who likely have Intellect Devourers in their heads, and are Cora and Fildo Illithid, or are they taken over by Illithid? So surprise, the Queen of Wolfreen might be an Illithid. Great, good job, everyone. So we keep going downstairs. This staircase leads down, and we're going to go downstairs into what is the prison that is below the Bright Keep that everyone keeps talking about. And above the door, as we get inside the prison, there's a shield with an eye in the center of it that feels like it's watching you. So we travel down the hallway, and we're brought to a set of iron doors. The 2 guards that are behind us peel off, and Pipkin and Gordo keep leading us down, and essentially we're alone with them. for a moment. So we advise them to be as normal as possible and get as far away as they can, and do their best to remain some sense of normalcy until they can go out and find Horlin. We go into the room where there's being processed, and there's two captains sitting at a desk. They both nod their heads at the same time. It's weird. And they open a portcullis to bring us out and start to bring out, so that the jailer, who he had heard about as a giant Firbolg, who is essentially the jailer responsible for bringing prisoners down to the prison, they check over us, and Callie's hiding in Neppy's pocket in her vestments, and she manages to kind of scoot in there and is safe amongst the plethora of silks that are in there. The guards clock Spooky's pants and tell the jailer, who is holding this giant fucking glaive, that Spooky is unique, saying nothing else other than that. So they go to put manacles on us, and everyone kind of takes an eye at each other, and then shit pops off. Callie is Spooky drops polymorph on Callie as she tumbles out of my pocket holding her sword ready to go. Kokanee is hasted, and we start combat with these two Intellect Devourer head filled captains and this giant jailer, who likely, we are assuming, also has an Intellect Devourer in his head, and we were proven correct. Callie essentially fucking like does 100 damage in one turn, which is wild, in one of the turns. And on one of her early turns, she kills one of the first captains, to the point where she does so much damage after him being hit once or twice by other people before, that she kills it and the Intellect Devourer in 2 hits, and it's fucking so cool. Spooky casts Blight again with these yellow sickly chains wrapping around these the captains and the jailer. Neppy goes at the beginning of the round. Neppy casts Holy Weapon on Callie's sword, so she does extra damage, and we're doing really well. Not without taking some hits for sure. And in one of the attacks, Callie, the captain, has 69 damage or like health left, and Tim feels it pertinent enough to tell us that. And so Callie's up next, and in one turn, Callie does 69 damage, killing the the captain. So it's a real nice moment. Finnan gets the kill on the jailer, and I think Callie makes really quick work of both of those captains. It's a hard fight, and definitely Letters and Spooky take some hits as they're closer to them, simply by nature of where we were placed in the room. We search the jailer, and we get his keys, and the desk that the captains were sitting behind is empty and like sticky. It's like slimy a little bit. It's really gross. It did allow Callie to do like a really great like Dukes of Hazzard slide across the desk so that she could kill this captain. Yeah. So Spooky asks Neppy if it's okay if she animates 2 of the captains, or one of the captains and the jailer, as skeletons to come with us. And Neppy says, well, I mean, it's not great, but sometimes you have to do what you need to do, and in times of great need, we need assistance. So Bill and Ted, the skeletons, or I'm not sure if they're zombies, Jenny, you're going to have to correct me, are coming with us. And Letters, Finnan heals Letters using his sweet Celestial Warlock abilities, and Callie uses her lay on hands to heal Spooky, and we're all good to keep going. As Bill and Ted are coming with us, we only need to hide one of the bodies. So we kind of prestidigitate the blood away, and we tuck one of the captains who's left there, his body, under the slimy, sticky desk, and we make our way down through the prison. So we head down in there, and strangely enough, but we should have fucking thought about this, there's no prisoners in there. So our sense is that there was never any prisoners. They just started taking them down into what we had heard about, that this false prison was hidden behind a wall, a fake wall. And obviously we have somebody with us who is so good at knowing what is rock and what is not rock. So Clack takes a quick look through the prison and finds that, yep, one of those walls is definitely not a wall, at least but from eyesight. So we unlock that cell and we go through it, and it is just an illusion. Finnan takes a quick look to make sure that there's nobody behind it with that sweet, I don't know what the name of the Eldritch evocation is, but it's a dope one that can allow him to see through walls. And so we cross through the threshold of this illusionary wall, and that is where we left off at the end of episode 48. So we were originally not going to be able to play for 2 weeks, but because y'all are amazing, we're actually going to play tomorrow night, which put a little bit of a lit a fire under my butt to do this recap. So now we have it. So Adam, you're now caught up. And I fucking love all of you so much, and I'm so happy that we get to do this thing. And guys, we're going on a dungeon dive, and we're going to fight some mother flipping illithids. That's terrifying and also really amazing. I love y'all. And is it Monday yet? Talk to you guys soon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 49 of Blackwater, a session held on October 7th, 2019, titled Steal Your Mind. So we start off with the group passing through the false wall that Clack found as we enter into the prison below the Bright Keep. Wow, a truck just passed really close to my car. It almost hit it. Okay, keep going forward. Sorry. So we send Bill in first. Well, Callie passes Neppy the bag of holding back. Everyone takes their stuff back, make sure they're reattuned to their objects, good to go. Bill and Ted, our headless skeletons, go first, and with Kokanee and Spooky going 60 feet ahead, taking the look for traps. The cave is about 10 feet tall and about 7 feet wide and kind of angles downward. After about 30 minutes of travel, the tunnel opens up into a larger chamber, and a scroll pops up in front. And the baby was fussing at this point, so I missed what it said. Someone will have to fill me in on that. But there were iron cages that Finnan can see with his dark vision. At about 120 feet ahead, the chamber is about 60 by 80. There's one cage on the cart, and Finnan kind of move up front, and it looks like there's a halfling looking pretty rough, a figure sitting against the side that's saying, "Hello, please help. I know. Hello, I hope you're there." Kokanee clatters a stone, and then the figure starts speaking. And Kokanee casts message to the figure, but there's no response, so that's kind of weird. So Finnan approaches the creature in the cage, and then has to make 2 intelligence saves. The creatures and 2 other creatures kind of come out from behind, 2 more Intellect Devourers, and he kills them super easy with his magic and spear, and he just kills them dead very quickly. The halfling continues to cry out, "Please help me." Spooky casts a spell magic, and it turns out to be an enchanted corpse. Finnan then finds another tunnel. There's no rats around, so the cart, we continue on, and we find another kind of illusory wall covering a tunnel. So we continue down that way, and Finnan is taking a look out ahead about 120 feet, and he hears this faint sound. There's no tunnels beneath, but it's definitely continuing going forward. The tunnels split, and we take a look for tracks, and the tracks continue to head to the left. So we go to the left, knowing that there's a tunnel to the right that we will have to go into. The tunnel goes about 300 feet until it opens up into another chamber. There is cages and flickers of movement, and we see 2 hunched figures covered in fur with some smaller creatures moving. Finnan runs in, the tunnel curves, and the cave is being floated down away from us and down another hallway. It's about 40 feet and disappears to the left. So this tunnel, there's paw prints of Intellect Devourers here. We this tunnel is more worked. There's kind of a film on the walls and the air is quite humid. So we traverse about 60 feet to the stone door. Kokanee finds a handle and there's 3 holes pushed with some sort of locking mechanism. He tries to start picking the lock and has to make a dexterity saving throw, which he fails, and he gets his finger pricked by some sort of needle with poison. His head begins to pound, and it seems to be a liquid film on his residue on his hand, and he's been poisoned. He can't speak. His speak is unintelligible. Neppy casts List of Restoration on him, and he regains his ability to speak, but speaking feels odd for him. Potentially a residual effect of the poison, which Callie tries to cure with lay on hands, but he doesn't feel any change. So Kokanee tries again to pick the lock and is unable to. It's a bit of a foreign locking mechanism, not really anything anyone has ever seen before, but Letters and Spooky manage to unlock it. So the door opens and we move forward, and there's a cage with something inside. It seems to be a laboratory of some kind. There's 3 long gray quartz crystals over bowls with liquid. We see 2 cages. There's a cage with a smaller creature in it that's kind of shivering with a small dish in the cage. And there's a that's a cage with a small creature in it on the floor. That's that bigger cage. And in that cage is a male gnome who's barely conscious, blood on his face, and his eyes are swollen. We manage to talk to him. I heal him for very few hit points just to bring him back. His name is Taryn, and he says he's got jumped outside of the glitter pole by Glitter Guard. So we don't know why. He doesn't remember anything other than that, and it's been about a day that he's been down here. On the table, there is a pseudo-dragon in the cage. It's like a little bronze pseudo-dragon. Neppy, speaking Draconic, speaks to it and says, everything's going to be okay. We're going to get you out of here. They manage to open, and she feels this kind of wave of fear. It's afraid of her, and she manages to coax it out and coax it into Callie's arms. The little pseudo-dragon seems receptive to her, so we free it, and it curls up into her robes, or into her armor, and she names it Taral, which is a name in Celestial. So we go and we free Taryn from the cage, and we let him know that, he's welcome to come with us. It's probably the safest place, but we can get him out of here. Letters investigates the crystals there, and he hits them, or touches them, and they make this resonant sound, and the dragon, a little pseudo-dragon, seems to take it hurts it. It's painful to the pseudo-dragon when that noise makes his wings flick out, and he looks really mad. Letters takes a look at the book. There's this book on the table it seems to be a language that is almost written in a stanza-like form, but is not music. There's a quill that's metal-tipped, and it's a language that's unfamiliar. Clack says it's undercommon. And Neppy kind of puts a couple things together, that it's the Illithid do have a form of a written language called Qualith, and we make an inference that this is Qualith. So Letters takes the book. Kokanee sees a hint of a shadow moving past the door, so we follow that. About 40 feet away, there's another doorway, a faint bluish-violet glow, that we end up following. Finnan steps ahead, and this doorway, it smells of like rotting meat for sure. So he sneaks in, and then there's this kind of like open cages of various sizes. They're stained with blood and kind of corpse bits, and then this big door starts to close on Finnan, and he can barely hold it. We rush in down this hallway to follow him. Some Intellect Devourers come out of the cages in this room of the door that Finnan is holding open him, so we start fighting, getting to combat with those. At that moment, a figure steps out from behind us. It's floating. It's a super thin and lithe. It has tentacles on its face, a long black cloak, and it's levitating. We all have to make intelligence saves. Kokanee fails, and he takes like searing pain in his head, and takes damage and is stunned. So we go into combat. And this giant like flesh golem of what we're assuming is what this creature has been, like this illithid has been experimenting on, creating this kind of like Frankenstein's monster-esque creature of all of these old corpses sewn together. Bill and Ted do some great damage on the illithid, and Spooky casts negative energy flood, and her magic comes out is this like sickly yellow spiral shape that goes towards the illithid, and definitely a change in the way her magic looks. So the flesh golem is attacking us, and it has these mismatched arms with scythes for hands, and we're all kind of trying to both manage this. Callie misty steps into the room where the door that Finnan is holding open up to kill these two intellect devourers, making like 4 intelligence saves, which is awesome, and she's like doing great. So we managed to kill the golem, kill the 2 intellect devourers, and then all of a sudden the flare pops out of existence, and it obviously knows we're here, and who knows if that's the only one. So we investigate around, and we smash these gray quartz crystals that are vibrating with this resonant energy, and Callie shatters them, and so does Letters. Also in the previous chamber there were musical instruments, I think. Yeah, there was like a violin and a small flute, a violin, a drum, and they were all deconstructed. So we took those pieces and we took everything from that room as well. So we go back into the previous chamber that we were in, that laboratory, and we smash the crystals and just basically set fire to the room. And Letters uses his bonfire spell to kind of control burn the room. So we continue on, going to the end. One of the end chambers, there's this large table with this series of metallic instruments and large shelves with full of body parts in jars that are in some sort of preservation liquid. In the room that there's this metal orb on a copper rod, so we take that as well. I'm not sure who has that. Spooky pulls out a jar out of her bag that has something that she got in Adonis's shop that has like a hand in it, and it's the same. So Adonis has something from this place, which is super weird and not surprising. So there's all sorts of body parts in jars, humanoid, bestial stuff we've never seen before. There is a desk with a large liquid bowl on it. The liquid in it is opaque and white, but is not the same as Neppy's white water. So she goes over to it, taking a look, and she touches it. So she's been wearing the talisman for a couple weeks now, so her actions are starting to get a bit more chaotic. So whereas Neppy might not have touched it before, it seems pretty clear to me that she would, in that moment, have been kind of affected by the chaos of the talisman. So she reaches out and touches it, and it seems like there's something probing and seeking a connection with her, and she manages to make the save to not be taken over by it. There's a desk in this room, the desk that has this bowl on it. Letters takes investigating, and he finds stacks of parchment, writing implements, and quills, and underneath there are kind of these 2 crumpled pieces of paper with arcane writing on them. Spooky takes a look, as they might be spells. There's one of them that is a necromancy spell, which is called Skull Watch, which is essentially a kind of an alarm type spell, and another evocation spell, which Letters takes, called Bigby's Dexterous Digits. And there are some diagrams of anatomy that look to be very ornate. So Letters passes these to Neppy, as she's got some medical history to her. So as we continue to look around the room, we see these 2 large glass cylinders, like 2.5 feet wide by 6.5 feet tall. One has a full-grown orc in it on one side, and on the other side, the other cylinder has a drow male in it who is naked. Letters thinking that this, or at least a drow, knowing that the sentience in his ring of mind shielding, Volketh, is also a drow. He
tries to check in with Volketh, like, is this you? Is this someone you know? And he touches the ring to the chamber, and Volketh communicates with him in their musical fashion. So it seems that Volketh is in some form of suspended animation, and we're going to have to rescue him. So that's it for episode 49. Tonight, episode 50. I forgot it was episode 50. So this is very exciting, and love you guys lots. And I was about to say, is it Monday yet? But yeah, it is Monday. Can't wait to play with you guys tonight.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to your episode 50 recap for Blackwater, session occurring October 14th, 2019. This episode is titled The Path of the Moonlit. Okay, so we open still in the underground jail below the Bright Keep, and we are in the room with these two tanks, one of them containing a drow and one of them containing an orc. So Neppy takes a look at the tanks and we have no sense of whether they're alive, but they seem to be in some sort of suspended animation. So Letters presses his ring of mind shielding containing the sentience of Volketh to the tank, and Volketh speaks, and actually speaks some common, which he had not before. He'd only spoken undercommon to everyone before. And Neppy takes a look and she sees that there's some damage to his skin through the tank. So Finn and Letters smash the glass and they catch Volketh. And Letters puts the ring of mind shielding on his finger and he breathes in and pops back to life. And he attempts to teleport out. Letters tries to counterspell, but it fails and he pops out of existence and just teleports himself away without even a thank you. We discuss potentially finding him or casting sending to him at a later date when we're not in a underground prison surrounded by mind flayers, potentially. So we break the orc out as well. The orc is fully dead. So Neppy performs a quick blast rites on him and Letters burns the body, and we escape that chamber pretty quickly. So we continue down this chamber and there's a bit of a dead end. So we go back and we go down the other way and there's this naturally occurring tunnel. And there's this like dank, rotting, it's like wet fish smell. So we keep going down the tunnel and we see these creatures that are hunched over with these kind of modified claws, and they start fighting us. And then these gross kind of things come down from the ceiling, like these brain-like entities, which are called grells. So they come down from the ceiling. The Quagoths, which are the kind of the creatures hunched over, cast heat metal on Callie and Finnan, and Finnan has to drop his shield, or tries to drop his shield, but it's stuck to his hand, and Callie's breastplate heats metal, and they both take damage from that. Kokani casts Spirit Guardians to a newer spell for him to help clear the area, and they are the image of Warforged, kind of like Cogman back in Caradoc, the image of these old ancient Caraxian Spirit Guardians coming to his aid. So we make quick work of these, and we continue down the tunnel about 400 feet as we come around a corner, and we hear the sound of like crashing of water. We see an underground lake with some small waterfalls coming out of the stone. The lake is about 2,500 feet across, and there's this kind of blue glow at the top of this huge cavern where there's some like phosphorescent moss is giving off the tiniest bit of light. Finnan sees if he can take a look across the lake and sees these larger structures. There's some buildings, and something, they look empty, and stone carved into the rock. There's some tracks along the shore leading back to where we came from. As we take a look along the shore, Neppy sees something of like worked iron, a crystal brooch that's iron crafted. It's a mask of crystal lenses over the eyes. It looks like almost like an operatic mask brooch kind of thing, and it looks elven, drow in nature. Finnan takes it and takes a look through the lake, and he is able to see through this kind of brackish water of the lake, and sees a staff half buried in the water about 800 feet offshore. This kind of spiral white top to it, almost pearlescent in color. It's about 100 feet down. He looks around the lake to see if there's anything else in there that could potentially hurt him, and there just looks to be some fish. Letters is curious about the water, so he touches it and then tastes it, which forces him to make a wisdom save, which he makes, but definitely there's something not right about the water. It makes his brain have to flex, as he calls it. So in an instant, Callie pops her wings out and flies Finnan out to literally just above where the staff is and drops him down. He swims down, and the fish spiral around him as he reaches the staff, and they close in, trying to restrain him as he breaks free, grabbing the staff and swimming up to break the water. He jumps almost and has to make a wisdom save herself with the water, and so does Finnan. They both make it, and then they make it back to shore. The staff is beautiful. It's ebony and kind of cold and ironish with this white wood that looks like a marble. The tip of the spear is broken, but it's inscribed in Sylvan, which Finnan can read, and the name Relauven is engraved into it. Finnan, we decide to take a short rest here. Neppy asks if we could take a long rest, but everyone agrees that the short rest is the only rest we can take, despite the fact that we are getting low on resources and spells. Finnan takes some time to attune to the weapon. His eyes kind of glaze over black and white, and the spear, the words kind of come off, and he learns this ancient history of Zandalar and Veron, the Lord of Night, who was wearing the mask, and Zandalar, this like beautiful woman, elven woman with kind of light blue skin and long golden hair. He learns of these people who ancient thousands of years ago they were married, Zandalar and Veron, and there was a civil war that fractured these two people. There's visions of a battle, these elemental sky ships with dark gray energy shooting out of pits, and unearthly creatures trying to bring these ships down. He sees an image of Zandalar, the woman, pregnant, and the drow starting to retreat underground. Zandalar is holding a child who also has dark purple skin, but her shining gold hair. And his vision shifts, and the child grows, creating the staff with this purple crystal and a finely pointed spear. And this child grows into a young man leading a group of people descending into the earth, into this underground city. And as Finnan's vision comes to a close, he sees this statue on the shore that is of who he assumes to be this child, overlooking his people. The image shifts again, and we see that it's the actual person, or Finnan sees that it's the person, the young man. And as he sits on this kind of chair, he's assassinated by this figure in shadow from behind. Finnan's kind of comes out of this vision, and he hears a voice and asks, does he wish to unite people? And he says he wishes to protect them. The voice says, well, you're bound to another. Finnan remarks that Dave is not a chill dude, and asks, the voice asks him if he harbors anger, and the Finnan hopes to free himself and govern, and the voice asks him if he wants to help govern with hope. The voice identifies itself as Relauven, the sun, and he hopes to help bring together. He was someone who brought together refugees of the Civil War and had this people who retreated underground, and started this civilization. He remarks that Finnan is humble, and that he may have his guidance allowed, and grants him his guidance, effectively shifting patrons for Finnan. So, but Dave, his other patron, the one akin to Paylor, is not pleased about that. So as he accepts the patronage of Relauven, embarking on the Moonlit, the Moonlit patron, the staff alights, and he hears Dave chastising him, and he feels this burning sensation, and his eyes are seared white hot, and he is blinded. So his old patron, Dave, is effectively blinded him. He removes his armor, suddenly having it feel too heavy for him. Relavin instructs him to put the crystals from the brooch in the glasses and allows him to see. Everyone else is kind of letting Finnan do his thing. Talking about what it's like to be 15. And Epi asks if all 15-year-old boys go through this kind of crisis of faith and life. And Letters asks Kokanee what he did when he was 15. And Kokanee gives him a little bit of background on his life, that he was a collector, and tells Letters about what his life was like, that he was kind of indentured to the Sultan, and his father works for him. And Letters shows, or Kokanee shows Letters his heart, or the plate that is over his heart, and discussing how the Sultan has control over that if he stops sending things back. Finnan comes back, and he's stripped the armor and the shield off, and tells us everything of his experience and his blindness. His eyes are kind of these silver and black crescent moons. They're definitely blinded for sure. He looks across the lake, and he can see with the goggles on, and he sees the statue of Relavin. And Nepi asks if he wants her to try and fix the blinding, but he says he's okay for now. And she says, well, when we've got some time, I would like to take a look at the damage to your eyes and see if there's anything that we can do to fix it. So we start to walk back up. The staff bends light around it, and it's not seeming to necessarily reflect it, but bend it. And we return to the original tunnel fork. Taryn, the gnome, is still with us, and Nepi is untrusting of if he's a real gnome, based on the illusions that we've had before, but he seems to be expressing genuine fear. So we walk down into another chamber. It's about 30 by 30 worked stone, and then there's one tunnel thinner and taller. The air doesn't look quite right. The Spooky sees and stops Letters as he almost walks into this gas. So we see the trap. It's this crystal that's floating, and Callie tries to throw a javelin at it, and it ricochets backward, and then Letters lifts Clack up onto his shoulders, and Clack, using his small hammer, shatters the crystal, disarming the trap. So we walk about 200 feet down. There's two tunnels, a left one and a right one, and we turn into the left, and there's about there's a chasm about 15 feet in, and it looks about 40 feet across. Finnan looks down into the chasm, and you can kind of see about 200 feet below, and it almost like Finnan, as he steps away from the light, he starts to blend into the shadow. About a foot down, where there's this kind of shelf, then he can see that there's these shards of bone suspended throughout the chasm. Finnan summons a shadow creature, this kind of small a cat-sized creature, but not quite a cat, kind of emerges from the shadow, curling around his legs, and he sends the creature, almost as if a familiar, going down into the chasm. And he gets about 2 or 3 feet down, and there's a gelatinous cube in there, and the shadow creature that he summons starts taking damage, and Letters, using a lightning lure, pulls the creature out of the gelatinous cube. But so if we have to cross the chasm at some point, we can't go down, we must go over it. So we go toward the other side, stealthing through, and we see this kind of a cavern where there's tents and some Quagoth around there. It looks to be maybe 10 to 15 Quagoth some children as well. And Finn stealths across the village, looking at these cave murals, and that looks to be kind of depicting a giant Quagoth head. It's almost like a shrine of some description. He uses his mask of many faces to look like a Quagoth. He finds an exit on the other side, about 120 feet away. Finnan casts Silent Image of the flare that directs the group of Quagoth over to the side near the mural to make a pass, so that Blackwater can pass. Some of the Quagoth don't believe the image, but do it anyway. We quote unquote stealth around. Nippy kicks a rock because she's loud and makes it through. We find another branching, and there's both the tunnels are quite moist and wet, and the tunnel to the right curves down and the tunnel to the left curves up. So we take the tunnel to the left that starts to climb up, and it opens into this worked stone chamber with crates stacked around the edges, and there's two large stone pillars, and there's two people lashed to the pillars and looking pretty worse for wear, and one of them is a older gnome who we might think to be Spooky's dad, and that's where we ended off. So our next episode is tonight, episode 51, this evening. Looking forward to seeing you guys. Love you a lot, and it is Saturday. So is it Saturday yet? Yes, it is. Love you guys. Hello everyone, Emma here with your episode 51 recap for The Adventures of Blackwater, episode happening on October 19th, 2019, and the title of this episode is Deeper into the Forgotten City. So as we open the session, Letters steps into the room where we have we see two smaller figures lashed to two pillars, and that is an illusion, and that fades, and there's this pit in the center of the floor with a sticky tar-like black substance in it, and three mind flayers show up, and we fight them. We end up so Callie and Finnan are both stunned and Kokanee, the three of them kind of take turns being stunned essentially. And while at the end of it, Kokanee manages to break the stun. Callie feels like, not the stun, but they fail charisma saves. And as something at the very end of the fight, Callie can't shake the feeling that something is retreated into her mind and is hiding out there, evading her. But before that happens, Letters make some quick work after a couple rounds of the main plan is to knock the illithids into the pit with what seems to be a black pudding, or what do they call black pudding? Black ooze. Yeah, whatever those ones are. They're down in the bottom of the pit. Black pudding. And then he ends up killing two of them with Steel Wind Strike in one round. Finnan, meanwhile, is grappled by one of the flares for most of the fight, and it tries to suck his brain out. It's not good, and he ends up taking a lot of damage and has some hit points left, thank goodness, because if he had dropped to 0 hit points, he would have likely had his brain sucked out. But Neppy casts Harm on the illithid in front of him, doing some big damage, and then the Spooky kills the last one with her magic, and its skin tends to desiccate, and it looks as if it's with her blight spell, it's particularly kind of sickly magic that emanates from her. Neppy casts Life Transference on Finnan to get him back up to a bit of health. And as we take a look around the room, we that feeling that something is standing right behind Callie, she can't seem to shake it no matter how hard she tries. There's some crates that are in the room, and there's some coin and some gems and a circlet, an iron circlet that has etchings of High Tongue on it. So Kokanee takes it, and it is its name, it says the Eyes of the Warden. So he doesn't put it on as of yet, but he will later. There's a black metal sickle, and Spooky takes it originally, but realizing that she can't use a sickle, passes it to Neppy, who can use it. And there are, and at that point, Callie takes the talisman. So she is now holding the Chaos Talisman. And there's some quills and parchment, which look like they could potentially be for writing for the Illithid. So we continue down the right tunnel, and it becomes really humid and moist and opens up into a smaller chamber where we see Finnan uses his super great dark vision to see these kind of shelves built into the wall that have jars stored on them. We head into this kind of like brain room, essentially. There's walls that are decorated with art of some kind in these grays and purples, a triangular desk with medical instruments, jars in them with brains that look like they're in preservatives, and there's this machinery on the desk. It looks to be like an alchemical distillery of some sort that is absorbing concentrate from these brains in preservatives. In them are there's a an active one that's open on the desk with this orange distillate, so we take that. There's a syringe that is loaded, we take that. Neppy has that as well, and Neppy disassembles the entire set of machinery and takes it all as proof potentially that this is what they've been doing down here. 7 of the jars of brains have tags, and we take them. We take 7 jars. One of them is larger, which we kind of Neppy takes a peek at them, and we can discern them to be. One of them is a mind flayer brain, and one of the other ones is smaller, elongated, and different, and definitely not human. The artwork, Callie takes a peek at it on the wall, and with that feeling that thing that's in her mind, that sense that something is hiding out in there, it speaks to her in a strange way, not with a voice, but with kind of a feeling. This pattern emerges, and its shapes moving together and kind of hypnotic, and she can see that there's been thought put into it. So we continue down the path, and Letters passes by something, and kind of his brain fuzzes out for a moment, and it hits Finnan as well and causes him to make a melee attack against Letters. Sorry, and he points at an alcove, and we see another crystal and another trap, and Callie breaks that. We travel down another 200 feet down this tunnel, and it opens up into quite a large cavern, probably about 6 to 8 city blocks in diameter. It's huge, and it's on the other side of the lake, and we can feel something large and heavy-footed walking around. So we sneak in kind of this burgeoning settlement of stone buildings, most of which are old and crumbling, like thousands and thousands of years old. On our right-hand side, about 80 feet, is this tower. And on the left-hand side, there's this group of smaller stone buildings. One of them is a 2-story, and there's this large stone sculpture of a spider built out of the wall. The lake is beyond the tower, and there's some buildings there, and we can actually see the statue that Finnan had saw an episode or 2 before on the other side of the lake, the statue of Relavin sitting on essentially the throne in what looks to be his city. So the city itself is illuminated from the ceiling by this kind of like blue-green phosphorescent moss. We're hiding out, and we see movement from the small stone buildings. There's 2 Quagoths in this 2-story building that they're dragging something and bringing it inside. And then on the other side, we spot this large figure, 22 to 24 feet tall, grayish skin with a black mane of hair, and carrying an axe or a stone maul of some kind. The tower has no tracks leading towards it, and it's about 3 stories high. And there's some smaller buildings behind it, and we see that the activity is primarily centered in that 2-story building and that one next to it. So we head towards the tower, seeing some claw marks, and the stairs have been destroyed, and there's this faint kind of pungent odor smell. There's no creatures, but there's this Finnan, using his kind of ghostly gaze, sees this bull on the top floors. So we fly up. The stairs are intact up there. Letters finds a trap and Callie disarms it, and we enter the top floor, and it's almost like there's this satellite dish with rods coming out of it, and Callie feels the presence in her head, and with Kokanee help, she resists. She does take damage, though, trying to steal it out of her mind. Taryn, the gnome that is with us, he tries to push it out of his mind as well, and his nose starts bleeding and he collapses to the ground. So Neppy casts Spare the Dying on him, and we carry him over towards the harbor as the cave giant makes its way towards the tower where we just were. We find some buildings that look abandoned, and there's some tracks that lead over to a boat, but there's webbing and stuff near the boat, and it definitely looks like there is something in one of those boats, so we are choosing to not go over there. There's 3 houses, or these 3 kind of old domiciles, 20 by 20, and so we choose the middle one, because not the one closest to the tower, not the one closest to the harbor, the one right in the middle. So we managed to kind of get inside, and all of us take a much needed rest. We managed to rest all 8 hours with Finnan using silent image to essentially cast the spell of and to make it look like there's a door or a block over the door of this domicile. The giant kind of makes its rounds and walks around. It almost walks through, and Finnan is able to maintain concentration on the spell without the spell flickering, which is amazing. And so we rest for 8 hours and then let Finnan rest an hour as he needs to for his short rest, while Neppy attunes to her new circlet, which is called, or her new sickle, which is called Snuff, and Kokanee attunes to the circlet. So he kind of has this out-of-body experience. It's kind of dreamlike, and he sees this flash of a building with these pillars that are vaguely familiar, the symbol of Arathis, and it's kind of the groaning of metal. The architecture is Caraxian design, but he hasn't been there before. And he gets the sense that he could try and recall the vision, but it would be really tiring for him, potentially leading him to some exhaustion. So, while this is happening too, Spooky casts Comprehend Languages to try and read the tags on the jars of the brains, because they are in Qualith, which is the language of the Mind Flayer. So the first one is and it says Bolin, Dwarven, and he's 700 years of age, and he was gifted with enchantment on items. The second is elf, a female elf, unknown in age. It says the name is Darkhet, and she was gifted with hypnotic portraiture and artistry. And the third one, human, name unknown, unusually resistant to psionic probe. The fourth one, Gallo, a Gith warrior, gifted with weapons and stealth. 5 unknown species, non-humanoid, coloring off, darker. The brain is non-humanoid, the coloring is off, and the brain is a bit darker, and it says can elicit affection from citizens, or proficient at eliciting affection from citizens. The 6th one says the elongated brain is an Umber Hulk, further studies required to enslave. And the 7th one is Chlorda, an abhorrent illithid with obsessed with arcane pursuits. So Spooky's also able, in the time that she has Comprehend Languages, able to read some of the Qualith books that we had picked up along the way, and it talks about using sound resonance to elicit commands from the pseudo dragon, with the whistle that we actually didn't pick up when we were back in that room. But we know that Taral, the pseudo dragon that now lives in Callie's robes and behind her shield while she's fighting, is quite susceptible to changes in behavior. With me at that sound. we think for a moment and we ask Taryn, the gnome, what he wishes to do and wishes to stay. This musician who has found himself down here in the caves of the Underdark, essentially, so we ask, is we give him, we think about it for a moment and realize that if we're going to need to plane shift out of here, considering that we have Clack, and also considering that we will likely need to take Spooky's father, we actually don't have place for Taryn to get out with us. So we give him, Neppy gives him her, one of her, sickles that she has, and we say that we'll come back for him, even though I think we all, and he knows that may not necessarily be the case. And I think we were just about to make some plans before we set out back for the tower to go destroy that dish before we investigated the 2-story building, where there's likely a bunch of mind flayers. So that's it for episode 51. Episode 52 coming at you on Saturday. So looking forward to seeing everybody. And don't get your brains sucked out, folks. Is it Saturday yet? Hello everyone, and welcome to your episode 52 recap, session happening October 26th, 2019, last night, and title of this episode, A Bit More Knowledge for You. So we open just before we leave the house that we had been holed up in, saying goodbye to Taryn, and Neppy casts Death Ward on Spooky. From where we are, we can see that the spider building, or the building that has this giant carving of a spider on it, the spider is stone. Kokanee prays to Arathis for guidance, and though they are far below the surface, he feels this warmth inside him and hears there's some frost that appears on the barrel of his gun. And she says, I am getting used to this plane and doing what I can. And she says, a bit more knowledge for you, giving him access to some new spells, which is very exciting. Finnan speaks to his will, or the being that used to provide his previous patron, that we were affectionately calling Dave, and not even apologizing for the severance or how they left things, but that it was time for Finnan to go a separate way, and that there was no hard feelings on his end, and he gets nothing in return. So we sneak back to the tower, watching the giant be across the city, and Letters ferries us up to the top with Fly. The dish is about the same. As Neppy goes to investigate it, the dish lifts and flies toward her, pushing her into the wall, and almost she manages to brace herself, and the dish then jumps almost, or is like rocketed off the balcony, and it tries to kind of push her off, but she manages to stay her ground, and it flies to the ground and it crashes. We run down to the bottom of the tower. We look to the dish. We trying to avoid the giant as it runs around. Kokanee casts silence, and we destroy it. Finnan sees 2 figures floating above the 2-story building, just kind of 2 illithid, and casts silent image of Taryn running, and the giant chases it, and the illithids descend lower. So then we destroy the dish. We go to approach the 2-story building, and we hear this groaning within a cluster of small buildings next to it, and we decide to keep going and come back for them. We hear the approach of the cave giant. It's got dull gray skin, these black tattoos, and a black mane of hair, nothing like ever what we had seen before. Spooky sends Wiggles to look, and he sees these 3 cages, where there's a female gnome, and it's Annalyn Stonebrook, a mentor of hers, a clerk that she had worked before, and they are a male gnome and a female Farbog, and they are awake but injured, and Wiggles returns to her. The doors of the 2-story building are closed. Letters and Finnan break the door. Finnan disguises himself as Letters and then casts mirrored image of himself with the disguise on, so there's a bunch of Letters. Letters is running towards the door to break it open. As they get through the door, Finnan is like hit with a slow spell, and the doors close themselves behind. They fly up and they close behind people. There's cages. There's 20 or over 20, 30, 40 people in cages and saying, run, you have to leave, you have to leave. And on the walk bay above, we see these two creatures jump down, these two ogres, to fight. And a larger Ulatharid descends from the top of the stairs. Kokanee and Callie and we are going into combat. Kokanee and Callie are stunned off the top, and Callie manages to break the stun, but Kokanee remains stunned for a lot of the battle. Finnan is using his mirror images to try and dodge a lot of the hits. Letters does Steel Wind Strike and hits a bunch of them for so much damage, and it's great. One of the Illithid attempts to dominate Letters using Dominate Monster, and Spooky manages to counterspell it. As we kind of go through the order, Neppy uses Chant to give everyone a buff, and there's a lot of good spells going around. And as on Neppy's turn, she hears the giant approaching, but obviously can't say anything because she's chanting. The Ulatharid tries to rip Kokanee's mind out and or is it one of the Intellect Devourers does a body swap with him, but fails. When the ogre dies, these giant Intellect Devourers come out of their heads. Finnan tries to turn the Ulatharid from flesh to stone and fails. The giant breaks in from behind us, hitting Spooky and Neppy, and then he manages to get out of the way. Neppy, while chanting, kills one of the Illithid with her gun. Letters then walls off the Ulithid with a wall of fire. We can't see him, and he can't see us, which gave him an effective way to teleport out with left unscathed. Spooky then banishes the giant, and Callie kills the last Intellect Devourer. Finnan runs through the flames where the Ulatharid is gone. We prepare ourselves, and Neppy casts Locate Creature to try and find the Ulatharid, and it's gone as well. So the giant pops back. We fire off a bunch of attacks. Kokanee uses one of the new spells he was gifted by Arathis, Heavenly Bullet, and Finnan manages to kill the giant with Letter's Shadow right up the butt. So Letters alights some fires and brightening the room, and the buildings are beautiful. Kokanee and Neppy and Spooky run back to the other buildings, and Finnan starts yelling for Spooky's father. They go upstairs, and there's a cage with some not moving figures, and they said, please help him, and they find Spooky's father, and they find him, and Finnan and Callie heal him, and Callie manages to bring up most of the people who were unconscious, and Letters canvasses the crowd for information. And we then pop over to Spooky and Neppy. They run to the buildings. The first building, Spooky finds the trap and disarm it. Kokanee tries to pick the lock and fails, and Neppy just kicks down the door. Inside, we see Annalyn and Corman and a female Philbroke. But they talk that they have to leave, that the cages are 5 feet apart, and that there's something that's been happened to them, something that's been put in their head. They see there's this scratching near an eye. Corman talks about how this only happened yesterday, and a small thing crawled inside their face. They don't remember much because they were different. He was supposed to be given the same oath of fealty as most of the captains, but he was destined for greatness, so this happened to him. Neppy thinks for a moment, and she doesn't know, they don't know a lot about the procreation of Illithid, but it's likely not an Intellect Devourer in their heads. So Letters joins Kokanee and Neppy with Finnan, saying that they found their father. Finnan takes Spooky back, and Callie is there. They reunite. Spooky's father says that Fildo's mind is not his own, and that he's doing this for Garl, meaning Garl Glittergold, trying to bring Garl back to this plane, which seems really a strange reason to do this when you're trying to get a bunch of Illithid to bring Garl Glittergold back. Spooky's father talks about how Fildo's mind is twisted, and he's so happy to see her and so proud of her, and it's like this beautiful, wonderful moment of father and daughter reuniting. And we flip back to Kokanee and Neppy and Letters, and Kokanee and Neppy and Letters discuss for a moment how to potentially get these creatures out of their heads. Neppy essentially prepares herself for brain surgery. That says she would have to pray to her goddess first, and this is definitely, in Letters suggests killing them with electrocution and then using the diamonds that we have to bring them back, which is possible, but would use up all of our diamonds, which is something Neppy would do, but she would have to pray on it. And Kokanee, in a flash of brilliance, casts spirit guardians, targeting saving Corman and Annalyn and the female Furbolg, but the creatures inside their heads die, and there's this gunk that starts leaking out of their eye. Neppy manages to salvage a little bit of this, and the three Annalyn, Corman, and this female Furbolg, they look a bit shook about what's happened, but they feel better, and they don't feel any creeping sensation or anything like that. And this effectively kills them. Neppy takes a peek through what has leaked out of their heads and finds a lot of these insect kind of like parts, this chitinous, remnants of chitinous material, and this would likely be what crawled inside their heads to it, and how potentially an insight into how a little bit more knowledge into how illithids procreate and what they were trying to do. People who are strong of mind and able to manage, they would take it, or try at least to turn them into illithid. So Annalyn, Corman, and the Furbolg come with us. We let them out, and we go into the next building. We disarm the trap and we kick open the door. There's 3 cages. One of them is dead. One of them there's a being that's curled up. The skin is moist and it looks bruised and purple, and there's kind of longer tentacles sprouting, and he's got blood rushing down from his chin. Obviously, this is the 3rd day of the transformation. Well, not obviously, this is the 3rd day, but obviously deeper into the transformation than the previous building with Corman and Annalyn. They had only been like that for a day. So obviously the procreation or the gestational process transfiguration or whatever process into illithid is quick. So there is this, and then there's a human who also has this kind of bruised skin, and he's floating a little rock in his hand, and he speaks to us, and his name is Oscar. And we ask him, do you know what's happening to you? And he said, well, if you just accept it. I couldn't do this before, and this is pretty cool, meaning the little levitation-y thing in his hand. Letters, Neppy's obviously understands what needs to happen, that they can't be left to live. They're too far gone, and she couldn't separate them. And Kokanee, she and Kokanee discussed that they could probably not separate them the way that they did the previous prisoners. The little creature that burrowed into their heads is likely taken root, and there would be no way of separating them. So we ask Oscar if he has any family that he wants to let know, and he says he has a wife in Cinderfall and a son, Tawny and Gus. So if we ever go into Cinderfall, we will be making sure to let them know that Oscar went out fighting. And with that, he attacks Letters, and Letters kills him, and Kokanee kills him, and they kill the other creature in the cage as well. We go to the last building, assuming that these are going to be full-fledged illithid in this building. That we get to the building, the door is ajar. Neppy says, well, should I kick it down? And they go, well, and then they go, well, I mean, if the illithids are likely already gone, there would be no reason for them to stay if a door was open, if they could get out of the cage. So we go inside, and there's 3 cages. One of the cages is open, and outside of it is a full-size illithid that is dead on the ground. And then there's 2 other dead figures in the cages. Well, they couldn't take the transformation, but the one of them managed to. And then there is a figure in the back corner who we speak to, and he asks who we are, and we ask who he is, and he turns around, and he is a small illithid, gnome-sized, who had undergone the transformation. And he says that he doesn't like what's happened to him, and he doesn't like these creatures. And his name is Zelix. So we offer to have him come with us. He seeks the Elder Brain. He seeks where the Illithid come from, the different plane that they come from. He's searching for a tuning fork to get to wherever the Illithid come from, because he can likely plane shift, but he has to get a tuning fork to go there. We let him know that he's welcome to come with us, and that Neppy offers to help him in exchange for his help down here. And he says that he'll come, but he'll stay outside the 2-story building. He's also very upfront about the fact that any opportunity he has to leave, he will. And that's where we left it. So next session happening October 31st, Halloween night at our place. Looking forward to seeing you guys. Costumes mandatory, not mandatory, but strongly encouraged. Love you guys. And is it Thursday yet? Hello, everyone. Welcome to your episode 53 recap for the Adventures of Blackwater. Session happening October 31st, 2019, Halloween. Session titled For Those in Need. So we started off, and we Finnan had, we kind of retconned that before we rested, Finnan asked Neppy to take a look at his eyes to see if there was anything she could do to fix them. When his goggles are on, in bright light, his eyes are black and pupilless. And when the goggles are off, they're this like milky white. And when the goggles are down, but the light is dim, his eyes are kind of fully silver, and they're kind of these transitional like phases of the moon. Neppy takes a look at them, and with her knowledge of medicine, she can see that at this point there are no pupils in his eyes, and that it's almost like they have been removed. Part of his eyes are missing, and there might be some magic at some point where Neppy can regenerate them, but but not as of this point. So we open with Callie realizing that Tural, the pseudo-dragon that she had behind her shield, is dead. Finnan says he can help, and takes the body of the dragon and says it feels right. Neppy's not quite sure what magic he possesses with regards to healing magic, considering the his patron hasn't gifted him healing magic anymore, but she lets him know that if she could be of any help, she can. So we discuss a plan that the locate creature spell that Neppy cast on the Ulatharid previously may not actually encompass the whole cavern. So there may be a sense that it could get them, but could find him, but not 100% sure. So we discuss a plan to fortify the surrounding building that we're in. The what did they call it? What did Tim call it? The meat prison? Yeah, the meat prison. We'd freed everyone from the cages, and Neppy finds healers, and gives the Throatbulg that was with Annalyn and Coramin a couple of vials of white water, so that she can help the healing as best she can. And the Letters is chatting to the Throatbulg healer, and she flirts with him, and it's great, and they have a wonderful moment where Letters just goes, yeah, we're definitely coming back. Neppy also casts life transference on Olin Wildcloak, Spooky's father, and gives him a few years of his life back. Kokanee, Callie, and Finnan work to kind of find fighters, people who they can equip. We take out some things from the bag. It seems like all of their belongings have been thrown into the black pudding ooze that we saw in one of the previous rooms, just to get rid of stuff. And we arm the people as best they can. So Finnan asks Relauven, his patron, if they've desecrated his statue, and Relauven says perhaps. So we want to go. Our plan is to go check out the building next door that has the spider on it, which we assume to be a temple of some description. And then there is a cluster of buildings up in the top left corner of the settlement that we have yet to look at, and Relauven's statue, and figure out where to go from there. So we go into the temple, the spider building, and it is a temple. It is a temple of Lolith. The doors are set into the jaws of the spider, and Neppy knows that that the popular deity of the drow is Lolith, who is the Drider goddess, the spider queen, shadows, lies, and scheming. This is a temple to her. And she was often looked down on by surface dwellers. So Neppy asks that if we go in this temple, even though she was looked down upon, please remember that this is a holy place, and we should not desecrate it any further than it has been likely already desecrated. The door is trapped, and so Kokanee attempts to pick the lock, and the poison, a prick, gets him, and he is poisoned again, and it does psychic damage to him, and Neppy casts lesser resistance on him to try and cure the poisoning, and it does not work. Finnan then tries to slap him out of it, and he slaps him, and then Neppy uses lesser restoration again and cures the disease. So it is a disease, and my sense is that it somehow gets worse the longer it is untreated. Kokanee then takes his gun and shoots right beside Finnan's head, deafening him essentially on one side, and then heals him with life transference in some strange eye for an eye square off, I suppose. We ask if this is all necessary, and then we decide to continue going forward inside this temple. So we go inside, and there's a stone relief in the floor of Lolith, leading the people through a cave system. There's alcoves on the sides, and then there's an archway forward that seems to be filled with rock and collapsed, but to the left-hand side there is a tunnel that leads down. Zelix, the gnome illithid, is with us, and we introduce him to the rest of the group, and we talk as a group about what to do. Zelix wishes to go down immediately and not wait. We think that this is a good plan, as the more time we spend up here, the more time they have down there, and they know we're here. So we make the decision to go, or think that we're going to go. And Finnan says no, he's not going to go. He's going to go clear the cluster of buildings in the top corner, and he will come catch up with us. We try and convince him otherwise, but he's not budging, so he goes. So he takes off on his phantom steed, and he takes off towards the buildings. He goes, he stealths up to the first one decently quietly, but the interior he goes inside, the door's ajar, and the interior's been redone in dark metal. It's cold and kind of a moist dwelling. The jars, there's some small brains, and there's rats that have been taxidermied, wearing small outfits in almost a diorama. Then he's in combat, essentially, and is being set upon by 3 illithids, stunning him and doing wave after wave of psychic damage. He gets psychic blasted and then grappled, and he manages to break the grapple a few times and break the stun a few times. There is one moment where he gets critted on while grappled by the illithid on an extract brain attempt. So for anyone who's wondering, that was 20 d10 of damage, and he sustains 96 points of damage, and which dropped him to 0 hit points and ripped his brain out of his skull, killing him. So, and we're in a building across the city. Well, not too far, but far enough. His shadow horse, or his phantom steed, as it begins to dissipate, as his staff clatters to the ground out of his hands, the horse lets out a kind of piercing whinny, and Neppy, with her high passive perception, hears it and takes off running. We run towards the building, and we see his body crumpled kind of through the doorway, in this mass. We don't see how bad it is, but then we look up, and there are 3 figures descending from the stalactites up below. So we get into combat. It's a hairy battle. Callie spreads her wings and takes off. Letters does some intense damage with a steel wind strike, killing 2 of them, one of whom had dominated Callie, and Callie, it had said inside, managed to succeed using dominate monster or dominate creature, and it told her to kill the small one, being Spooky. So they obviously have a vendetta against Spooky for some reason. Perhaps more to discuss on that later, something to see if Callie tells us, because we don't know that, but I know that because I'm writing notes. So Letters manages to kill 2 of them with a still wind strike, ending the domination, and there is one which gets decapitated, and its body falls to the ground, and the decapitated one is the one with Finnan's brain in his stomach. So Neppy gets the kill with the last one with a guiding bolt and runs to Finnan. Letters retrieves, or she runs actually to the mind flayer that has Finnan's brain in his stomach. She gets Letters to bring the body over next to Letters, or next to the mind flayer that she's going to essentially extract the brain from his stomach. If anyone gets queasy with discussing body parts and viscera, now is the time to skip ahead about maybe 3 minutes while I describe that process. So that's your content warning. So Letters sets out the ritual space and brings it. Nebby asks for someone with a steady hand. Kokanee kneels down next to her, and she shows him where to open, or she palpates the stomach or the abdominal region of the mind flayer, and seems that she can find a space in the abdominal wall. She has Kokanee slice open, or like a kind of a moon-shaped scar, a semicircular slice into the abdominal, so she can pull back the skin and take a look at the viscera inside. She finds what she thinks is a stomach, and has Kokanee basically separated from whatever esophageal tract they have, and remove it from the cavity. And as they take a feel of it, there's other stuff in there, not just a clumpy brain, which there is in there as well. I don't know what my cat is doing. She is being crazy. Hold on a sec. I apologize. She was playing with a toy and almost gonna wake the baby. Okay, so she goes to furl out her dress to strain it, and Kokanee says, "How about my shirt?" So strains the brain stomach acid soup through his shirt, and Neppy collects all of the brain matter that she can and places it back inside Finnan's head. She rearranges it as much as she knows of anatomically, and also realizes that there are a couple extra pieces of brain matter in there that are almost too difficult to separate without knowing what is Finnan's and what is something else. So she places it all in his head and back inside the brain cavity, and then uses the diamonds, places them in Finnan's mouth to start the raise dead ritual. So as Neppy does this, before she had started even the process of trying to put Finnan back together, she prays to her goddess and asks that she give her any guidance that she can, and that she can't lose another one, not after Torin, that she won't let this one go, and that he's supposed to be here. So Neppy appeals as the first part of the ritual, needing 3 to enact the ritual. She asks, she explains how it works, and that you need to call on his soul or try to convince him to come back, or ask him to return, intimidate him to return, threaten him. You can leave an offering of some kind, something that will help draw his soul back to his body. Neppy goes first. She appeals to him and tells him that if his mother could see him, she'd be very proud. She asks for him back, promising to keep him safe, and not as his boss, which he's been calling her lately, but as his friend. I rolled a religion check, and I rolled a natural 20 on that one. So Spooky says, listen here, you little punk, and attempts to intimidate him to come back, and she rolls a 20, not natural, with her intimidation check. And then Callie asks him to stand with her at her wedding and says that she needs him there. And she rolled a 12 on her persuasion check. And so Tim then rolls a dice to see if the ritual succeeds, and it does. The breath of life comes back to Finnan. His goggles broken, Kokanee mends them, and places them back on. And he's pretty out of it. He's at severe disadvantage to all of his abilities, and he feels pretty out of commission. So we take him back. We agree to take him back to rest, and to kind of oversee the defending of the people at the previous building. Because of the extra matter inside his head, it gives him access to the new cantrip Mind Sliver, and he has a splitting headache, which he can't get rid of. He's pretty out of it and has a pretty wicked scar in his hairline. So we agree to, while he's kind of recuperating, and we clear the rest of the buildings. So this one building that we're in right now is rounded, and there's a hallway. There's a desk with these taxidermy wraps on them, the dioramas of a small ship, a town square, and there's 3 small hats: a tricorn captain's cap, a captain's hat, sorry, a straw hat, and an executioner's hood. Spooky takes the captain's hat and the straw hat for Wiggles. In the room as well, there's a semi-reclined chair that's hovering, and is Finnan working to make a joke, and still showing that he's still got his humor. Convinces Callie that she moves it with her mind. Before we leave this building, Neppy asks letters to, or someone to retrieve the skulls of 3 of the Illithid, saying she has a fondness for skulls, and what better proof of mind flayers than actual mind flayer skulls, with tentacles and all. So we check out the other 2 buildings. The left building has a similar layout. There's books that seem to be made of some animal skin. There's a clear liquid in a jug sitting next to a chair with some long, thin metal instruments. Sorry, the baby was moving. Which seem to be a dental kit, which we take as well. And we take the books also, which look like they are written in Qualith. We then go to the 3rd building, and we get the sense that these are domiciles for the Illithid, or at least one type of area of living quarters for them, kind of the upper ground living quarters, I assume. And we have some spell components including, let me just flip back here in my notes, small jars containing a handful of thorns, a mithril scale, a caterpillar cocoon, an eyeball encased in a pink gem, as well as one jagged blue gem, which, as we kind of pass them over to put them in the bag of holding, one of them starts to vibrate and move, and it's insect-like, and it's looking at Spooky. So she takes that one and puts it in her bag. We take Finn in to see Relauven before returning him to the barracks this barracks that we've created, the meat prison that is, we've reclaimed. And so we drop him off there, and he will stay with the people for now, until we return from descending below. And Zelix, the gnome elephant, has graciously waited for us, letters, and he attempt to bro down, and Zelix agrees to do it once and then never again. And that is where we ended, preparing to make our descent into some hellhole below. Not a literal hellhole, but an underdark pit of some description. So that is where we ended it. Episode 54 coming at you tomorrow night, November, 3rd? And yeah, is it Sunday yet?
Hello, everyone. Coming at you in normal speaking volume because I am sitting in my car, and it's so cold, but I have like 4 blankets on, and here we go. Episode 54 recap for the Adventures of Blackwater, session happening on November 3rd, 2019. This session titled, It Was All for Garl. Okay, so we start off the session at the essentially the inside the temple of Lolith, taking a short rest before we delve down deeper into this cave that is heading below Zelix. The gnome Illithid agrees to wait. Letters asks, while we're resting, Letters asks Kokanee and Neppy if they are a thing. He says he's wondered for a while, and they say that, well, yes, they are a thing. Letters starts asking a lot of questions about their relationship and when they fell in love, and they talk about that it was after Torin's death, and Letters asks if Neppy was with Torin before, and she's like, no, certainly not. He was a friend, and that she had fallen for Kokanee slowly, and then really realized it when he showed her the book, the Bible that he's writing, and then she told him after Torin's death, because it didn't feel like she should wait anymore, because bad things can happen at any time. And Letters asks Kokanee the same question. Kokanee says, we will talk about this another time after we're not about to go face a bunch of mind flayers. The group agrees, and we continue to walk down the decline into this tunnel, and Clack is with us too, since Finnan is back at the the meat prison? Yeah, the meat prison, which we have reclaimed. It's just a 2-story building now. So the 2-story building with all of the freed prisoners. Finnan is back there kind of resting and recuperating, and helping as best he can there after we dropped him off. So Clack is with us. We get about into the tunnel. Letter starts checking for traps, and we hear this whirring happening about 20 feet ahead, and Zelix detects an enchantment. It's a field, and he sees this metal casing. Letters manages to deflect, or send some firebolts towards it, and it tends to break the casing, and then it doesn't break the casing. Nothing happens. He manages to dent the firebolt, but not doing enough damage to it to disable the trap. Before we go any further, Callie talks to Kokanee, or as we're walking down, and maybe this happens before we find the little whirring casing, and she says, she goes, hey, Kokanee, do you remember that thing I talked to you about before? And she goes, still, and then says, but we won't. One of them says, but we won't. I think it was Kokanee. Not sure what they're talking about, but obviously an important conversation between the two of them. So Callie, going back to what happens with this like metal ball casing, Callie throws a javelin at it and she pierces the casing and it cracks and like power fizzles. And we're able to kind of break through this enchantment and continue going forward. Letters starts checking for traps, and we realize that the tunnel splits into 3. Callie takes a look at the tracks to kind of see if we can figure out if there's people going in different directions, and we realize that it's the 3 sets of footprints, 1 down each tunnel, and they're all identical. So we realize that these is likely not the mind flayers, but somebody walking. Yeah, because mind flayers float. So Letters, we discuss how to go down this, and that it's been so far that Finnan has been kind of scouting ahead, but we decide at this point to potentially that Wiggles could scout ahead. So he goes down the middle tunnel first. He walks about 100 feet to the end of Spooky's connection with him, while Spooky goes kind of deaf and blind and starts perceiving through Wiggles as her familiar. And he kind of circles around and comes out the left tunnel, which we think is strange. On the right, we send him to the right tunnel. After about 40 feet, he comes to a ledge, and it looks like an illusory terrain, so it looks like flat, but it's definitely not. So he comes to a ledge, starts to fall off the cliff, and he falls about 100 feet, plummeting down, and Spooky is able to snap him back. She makes the dexterity check to snap him back. So on the left tunnel, it seems to go for about 150 feet and then come to a dead end. The stonework is different, and we find out that it's an illusory wall. On the other side, it is, however, pitch black, magical darkness. We all know Finnan can see in magical darkness, but we don't have him, so we're going to have to go down and figure out what's going on. We go down this tunnel, and then we step through the wall. Letters fires off a couple firebolts. We don't see anything. They hit something, but we're not sure what it is. So Spooky dispels the magical darkness. And we see that there is down the hall, Letters starts checking for traps, continuing on, and we find this large pressure plate, which we avoid because Letters finds it because he's doing pretty great at acting as not only our favorite fire wizard, but also our rogue. Thank you so much, Letters. The hallway continues on and starts to descend. So we send Wiggles out a little bit ahead. He walks for about 20 feet, but then falls into a tunnel. There's a space across. So we try and figure out, we talk a little bit about how to get across this thing, because the tunnel seems bad. And as he starts to kind of fall down the tunnel, Spooky pops him back. This tunnel space. So Kokanee jumps across the space. It's like a 10-foot gap, and he hits something. It's a pressure plate, and some spikes shoot out, trying to push him back into this pit that Wiggles originally fell down, this straight down pit, and he manages to avoid it, and he using a really great use of the jump spell that jumps back. So we're talking about we talk for a while about how to get across this. How do we kind of go and deal with this? Neppy suggests, kind of out of nowhere, that the Illithid, likely created this because they would just be able to float across and avoid the pressure plate. So this is definitely made to deter people. So what if there was a way that we could get insight into the Illithid? Zelix is actively resisting the thing about the hive mind, the elder brain, or whatever it is, the kind of their presence into their head. And then we realize Zelix can just go across. We actually do that after we do this thing that we do first. So we decide that potentially the way to learn more about this tunnel system might be to inject one of us with the brain concentrate distillate that we found upstairs in the laboratory. Neppy's great idea, to start injecting people with brain concentrate. And we discuss all of the different ones and realize that we would have to like reset up the distillery system and like get it to work. But we have one loaded syringe with brain concentrate, and Neppy offers that, you know, like happy to take one for the team, and like happy to be injected with this substance. That's fine. Especially if it tries to overtake her mind. And Letter says, whoa, like if you go down, we can't bring you back fully, so let me do it. So after a little bit of like trying to figure out the logistics of all this, Neppy says, okay, here we go. So she tourniquets Letter's arm, finds the vein, has no problem, injects the syringe into his arm. He makes a constitution saving throw and succeeds, and then gets proficiency with a forgery kit. So super helpful in this standpoint. It's then we realize that Zelix can float. And so he just floats across this gap. Sorry. And he says that the tunnel ends and doesn't trip the pressure plate, and the tunnel ends about a couple feet behind that. And after checking kind of like whether his truthfulness, he's being pretty truthful. He's not lying. So we send Wiggles down the slide, and we talk to Zelix a little bit first before we send Wiggles down the slide, and what his abilities are. And he's able to retain his arcane abilities, which is a lot of illusory magic, illusion kind of based abilities like confusion, illusion, stuff like that. And he's choosing to resist the command of the Elder Brain. And the incubation time, we learn, for Illithid is 1 week. He has been an Illithid for 1 week. Big change from being a gnome to an Illithid. And Zelix was his gnomish name, not the name of he as an Illithid. So we decide to send Wiggles down the slide first. And he kind of slides down this thing. It becomes really like wet and slippery and damp, and he goes all the way down and he lands in water, and these insect-like creatures swarm him as he splashes around, and they overcome him, and he dies, I think. Yes, that's what happened. Or is like not popped out of existence, but he's like devoured by these little tadpoles. Okay, so we're like, well, as long as we don't land in the water, we should be okay. Zelix goes down first and says that it's a spawning pool below. So it's a pool with like Illithid tadpoles in it, the things that they had put inside the brains of Coramin and Annalyn and the Furbolg healer that we had rescued and Kokanee had saved with the Spirit Guardians spell. So we know that just don't let them near your eyeballs, and it should be okay, but still don't go in the water if you can avoid it. So Zelix and Letters go first. As they hit the water, they electrocute the water, killing the tadpoles. Letters has to make a save as he enters the water, and this creeping probe kind of goes right into his mind. He fails the save, and it seems that the Elder Brain has created a link with his mind. He tries to save again and gets the psychic pulse of damage to his brain, and he hears this voice that says, "Welcome, do not resist." And it's terrifying and awful. And it was all a big pile of nope. So Callie and Spooky head down the slide, and as they get down, Spooky casts web over the water so that nobody gets caught in the pool. Callie or drops into the pool. Callie gets caught in the web. Kokanee goes down, also gets caught in the web. Neppy goes down last, putting Clack in the bag of holding, because if he touches the water, it's 5 feet deep. He would sink and he would drown. We don't even know if he needs to breathe. So like maybe he wouldn't drown, but like we wouldn't be able to lift him because he's a heavy boy. That would be bad. So we just put him in the bag of holding, say, Clack, hold your breath. He's got about 10 minutes of air in there, and he could likely last a bit longer because he's a petch and amazing. So we managed to get down there, and we're in the spawning pool. And as we kind of are getting our bearings, and Letters gets out of the pool, Letters is out, Zelix is out, Neppy is out, Spooky and Callie, Callie and Spooky, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember the order of events. She gets rid of the web. Callie and Kokanee drop in the water, and they fall in the water, have to make saves, but I think they both make it. If I remember right, they both roll really well. And as we're just getting our bearings, around the corner comes a mind flare, and who else but fucking Fildo Thorngage. What an asshole. Why is he here? We thought he was in Wolfreen. Turns out he wasn't. Maybe he was those footsteps that were back in the other tunnels, those identical footsteps. Anyway, so Fildo launches into some speech about how we shouldn't be here and how we suck and all that kind of stuff. And he tries to, that we talk too much. He tries to silence us. Letters counter spells and succeeds. There's some, like, Fildo, somebody tries to cast lightning, and Callie bends the lightning. Zelix fires off a bolt of lightning at the mind flare, and we are in combat. So Callie manages to bend the lightning and kills the first mind flayer with that, like, amazing ability she got from the air elemental plane in the temple of the winged serpent. And we are, like, full in combat. Fildo is there. We round the corner, and there is the elder brain, this giant brain floating over this gross pool, tentacles everywhere, and it's like, rule 1, don't go in the water. Very bad. Don't get hit by tentacles. Fildo's there. There's another mind flare. Plus, like, so there was 2 mind flares, the one we had already killed, Fildo, and this elder brain. So Fildo, as we're trying to, like, Neppy casts, we're in the order, and Neppy casts harm on the elder brain, and Fildo yells out that not Garl, and he thinks that the elder brain is Garl Glittergold. So this kind of harkens back to what Spooky's dad was saying about that he's doing this for Garl and he's trying to bring Garl back. So Fildo is convinced that this elder brain is Garl Glittergold. Crazy. So Fildo casts Otto's Irresistible Dance on Letters, and Letters is just, like, dancing. And Letters manages to break the dance. But in return, Spooky makes Fildo dance. Since he made Letters dance, it's a really nice retribution moment. The elder brain mind blasts all of us. Callie fails, taking a bunch of psychic damage, really, like, knocking the wind out of her. And Letters manages to go right up and target Fildo and throws him in this water, this, like, elder brain gross water. Kokanee in one of his first actions casts Ice Bayonet, a new spell that he's learned, gifted by Arathis, on his gun, and this, like, long sharp bayonet made of ice, like, tipped in frost, appears on the end of it, and he's just able to stab stuff and use it like a sword. So cool. And so Kokanee, we're, like, deep in the fray. It's a pretty hairy combat. A lot of us are taking damage, and they start targeting Callie and Kokanee and Letters and Spooky. So everyone except Neppy. Neppy's at the back trying to just, like, keep everything together and keep everyone alive. So Kokanee uses the Cape of the Mountebank to go behind the elder brain and starts stabbing the ice bayonet into the butt, or I guess what that would be, the occipital cortex, the brainstem of the elder brain. Yeah, as its, like, tentacles are, like, thriving around in the pool, it starts to, like, try and like, it grapples Spooky, and it grapples Letters and Kokanee, and a lot of them are grappled for a lot of the fight, but they're still, fighting around. So the elder brain lifts Fildo up out of the water, and one of its actions, it casts this, like, translucent dome of energy around Kokanee, surrounding him with a wall of force to prevent him from doing anything. The mind flare that's attacking Zelix, and he are kind of going back and forth with it, and it's a pretty hairy battle. He almost gets his brain ripped out, but is barely managed to hang on before ending up killing this mind flare. And through a couple like really tough saves and like just like can't break the grapple and just doesn't is stunned for most of the, no matter what we do. This mind flayer manages, the one that's been harassing Callie, manages to extract her brain and kills her. So she falls to the ground. Neppy is right there when it happens and casts gentle repose on her and takes on the mind flayer herself. So with Callie fallen, Letters starts hitting the elder brain with fire to try and get them to break concentration on Kokanee, and he manages to do that and breaks concentration on the wall of force. Kokanee uses his turn to stab the ever-loving crap out of this elder brain, and he manages to kill it. He kills the illithid that kills Callie with his gun and shoots the other illithid. The elder brain then lets go of Spooky. Fildo disappears. Neppy has cornered. No, that doesn't happen yet. So Fildo like disappears and starts. He's dancing. He's unable to make the save from Spooky's dancing. So he's still able to catch spells, but he's dancing. So he uses all of his movement to dance. Zelix kills the final illithid and starts searching it. Neppy calls for divine intervention to try and blight Fildo where he stands because they can't see him, and it fails. Letters starts investigating, looking for Fildo, and this brine pool. Looks in the brine pool, which is what the elder brain thing was called, a brine pool. That's so gross. No Fildo in the pool. Kokanee sees a river in a tunnel and there's no Fildo. So Spooky and Neppy go back kind of to the original, the like start of the where we kind of fell into this tunnel, and Fildo appears, and Spooky's forced to make a wisdom save and she succeeds. Spooky kind of gets her butt out of there and Neppy goes in there and basically is like, you surrender now and we'll let you live. And Fildo says, like, what have you done to Garl? How, like, he was a god, you killed a god. And Neppy tries to convince him, like, he was no god. He was a false god. That is not your god. Letters kind of comes in the fray and comes up to, like, give Neppy some support. And Fildo, the fucking coward, dimension doors out. Zelix in this time has found a tuning fork that's attuned to the plane that the mind flayers are from, and plane shifts away. Neppy lets Clack out of the bag for some extra support and goes to Callie. Clack runs ahead, looking down the hallway to see if they can find where Fildo has gone. They see this river at the end of this like longer tunnel behind the brine pool, where this like corpse of the elder brain, tentacles akimbo everywhere, splayed out in this gross pool. So behind that, there's this long hallway, and Letters catches a glimpse, or is it Kokanee? Kokanee casts, one of them sees a boat. I think it's Spooky gets to the edge, or one of them gets to the edge first and sees a boat. It's just starting to get out of vision. Spooky tries to fire on it with no luck. Kokanee shoots Fildo, and he's invisible in the boat. We can't see. We know, we kind of get a sense he's likely in the boat. We have no sense of if he's in the boat or not, but the boat is getting away. So Clack fires his wand of wonder down this hallway towards the boat, and in just a beautifully brilliant narrative moment, what else comes out of that wand of wonder but fairy fire, illuminating the silhouette of Fildo Thorngage trying to escape like a coward in the boat. Kokanee casts a spiritual weapon down the hallway, doing damage on him, and then shoots him right in the head, and he is dead. That is the end of Fildo Thorngage. Spooky casts before this happens, Spooky casts Tiny Tornado to slow the current, which Letters follows up with a firebolt to try and get on him, and that shot that Kokanee fired on Fildo, and the very last one that kills him is a natural 20, because of course it is. And he does 42 damage with that one, just blowing the brains out of Fildo Thorngage. So Letters swims after the boat and retrieves the boat and Fildo's body, and Clack helps him bring it up onto the shore. Meanwhile, Neppy, Spooky, and Kokanee run to Callie. They are able to extract the brain from the stomach of the illithid that ate her brain. And thankfully, with a bit more ease this time, because they knew what they were doing, and I won't describe the process because you all know what it was, but thankfully enough, this illithid hadn't eaten anything else, so her brain was the only thing in there. So no extra brain bits like Finnan has. So they are able to place her brain back in her skull cavity, and they use the ritual to cast Revivify. Now, we don't necessarily need a ritual, but we do a ritual anyway, because that's who we are, and we're Blackwater, and we're family, and this is what we do. So Neppy attempts to persuade Callie to come back, asking her that telling her that she needs to be here for Kamea, and telling her that she needs to be here for her goddess, and that she needs to be here too. She can't leave us. That's just not okay. And Spooky works again to intimidate her, because that's the vibe we've got going from Spooky, and says, listen here, and essentially a listen here, you little punk, come back because you have to. Kokanee pleads with her, says, you are the only person in existence here who knows High Tongue. Please, I need you to come back and help me translate Torin's book and help me learn more about my god, or my goddess. And so we all do our roles, a persuasion check, an intimidation check, and another persuasion check, and it succeeds. And with a breath, we are able to revive Callie, her brain intact inside her head, and that is where we left it for the end of session 54. So next session scheduled, I believe, for November 17th, Sunday night. So love you guys. Oh my goodness. And is it Sunday yet?
Hello everyone, Emma here with your episode 55 recap of The Adventures of Blackwater, session happening November 17th, 2019. I know I'm very behind on my recaps, my apologies. But here we go. This episode titled Treasures and Tangles. Okay, so we open in the lair of the Elder Brain after it's dead, after we have killed Fildo, and Letters has swam back and retrieved his body in the boat, and we have revived Callie. So she is alive, barely, and very exhausted, I think something like 4 levels of exhaustion. We have also leveled up. We are now level 12. Get it. Okay. So we investigate kind of the room. There's nothing on any of the mind flayers in here. Letters zaps the Elder Brain and turns it into mush. We take a look at Fildo, and he has a white pearl on it. He has his flute, which Spooky has taken, 1,000 gold pieces full of jewelry, which is all gold, and this golden amulet of Garl glitter gold. And we decided to, that we have to probably take him with us. So Neppy casts Gentle Repose on him, and puts him in the bag of holding, basically giving us 10 days to... He's in stasis for 10 days until we decide what to do. We also take a tadpole in a jar, one of the dead ones that we had killed before. We kill all of the little sauropods, I think they're called. We kill all of those. That Letter zaps the water, and Neppy pours some poison into one, as we had done before. So we would discuss what to do next, and we leave with a pretty comical series of events of all of us trying to get back up of this chute that had fallen down. Callie climbs up, pulling up Spooky, and then Kokanee, Letters climbs up, and then Neppy gets pulled up on a rope. Letters checks for traps on the way out, and all of the magic has been lost. Those within those crystals that the Jude of the Death of the Elder Brain.
So we return back to the meat prison, and there's these dead illithid, some dead rats, because the prisoners had fought them off. On this illithid, we find a little nautilus shell. Neppy takes a peek at it, and though she's unsure where it's from, it's not like any shell on Earth or on Earth Terrace, but it's a similar shell-like quality, and from whatever plane they're from, she assumes. We're assuming it's like translucent, kind of pearlescent, and it has a faint magical essence from the astral plane. So we're assuming that these illithid are from there, which would make sense kind of with their legends and lore around them. So Finnan lets us back in to the meat prison. He's still there. There's some soldiers wounded, and there's a female furbolg who's unconscious. Neppy heals her, and then Letters flirts with her a bit. Her name is Torna, and she's super in for it there, bud. So she's, they're flirting, and it's great. Finnan and Callie rest, and Spooky stays to look after everyone. Clack stays too, and then Letters and Kokanee and Neppy go to try and find Taryn, the bard that they had left in the house before, realizing that they had forgotten him, and they should have gone and grabbed him before they went into the underground, deeper into the Underdark. They should have brought him to the meat prison, but they didn't. So they're gonna go find him. They go back to the house and they find some footsteps in the dirt. Something made tracks, and there's some webbing, which seems spider-like. So we find the dagger that Neppy, or the scimitar that Neppy gave him. And then there's tracks leading towards the shore in the boat with this sticky fluid around. It's like, the tracks look different. There's like another line next to the body, like something else being dragged. It's one spider-like creature. It's big, but not like Shelob big. So we return to round up the gang, and we encourage Coramin and Bo, who is one of the other kind of able-bodied halfling men down there, has a crossbow, and he joins us, and Torna as well. So she was, even though her health was low, she's an able-bodied fighter, so she comes with us. There's this hull of this overturned ship, and Kokanee pings the hull with this gun, and some dust falls down, and all of a sudden we look up, and Neppy sees these cocoons with some leathery wings coming down, and it is a cross between a spider and a small dragon. So we've figured out this is a spider drake, and we end up fighting it. So we get some pretty good hits in. Callie, because she's so low on health, kind of almost keeps getting knocked down. Spooky uses Blood Bridge to heal her with Neppy's blood, because Neppy's super low on spells, and the spider drake tries to shoot this semi-white translucent substance, which is dripping black liquid. It's really gross. Spooky ends up getting the kill with Toll the Dead, doing some pretty intense ringing bell damage, and so once the spider drake is dead, Neppy tries to remove the, see if she can remove the poison sac from it, and she can't. Letters and Torna go investigate the overturned boat to see if they can find anything. They find some short swords and some old rusted scale mail, and some iron brooches similar to the ones that Finnan had that he used to help make his goggles. And then they investigate the boat, Letters and Torna, for a very long time. They are doing some very intense investigation of the boat. Yeah, they definitely make out and then have sex in the boat, and that's great and good for them. So we then get Finnan, and Finnan flies up and cuts the cocoons loose, lowering them down. There's a couple Quagoth in there, one dead Mind Flayer, and Taryn, who is also dead. Not long, and he's low. We're low on diamonds, and Neppy doesn't have the spell slots available, so we can't heal him that day. But we managed to get the last 100 gold pieces of diamonds from Letters' kind of gem bag that he has. And we make, plans to heal him first thing in the morning, perhaps when we go upstairs and find his friends. So we return to the meat prison. Finnan kind of stops and says that he's really wanting to stay in the town and kind of try and spend some time with his patron. And, that he'd like, that, you know, we obviously give him his space and like let him do that and tell him that he's obviously welcome anytime to come back when he chooses and that we're going to miss him. So before we rest, we take a little bit of time to have some gin and shoot the shit. And we identify a bunch of things because one of our very, very lovely wizards, Spooky, finally took identify so we can learn about all of this stuff. I love you, wizards, so very much. So Kokanee takes a look into the circlet that he has, and he suffers a level of exhaustion from it. He sees this large chamber, and with familiar markings, but his gaze is almost fixed. He's unsure of where he is. The pillars around him are 80 to 100 feet high. It doesn't seem static. It's real time. There is a light source. There's writing, the pillars, there's cogs and gears, so very Arathis-like. And there's this large set of doors about 60 feet high, and that's what he sees through this circlet. And Neppy asks, you know, like, if he wants to know more, she can help, and all she needs is some ivory, and she can help. So we identify a bunch of stuff. We first identify the Baron's armor, and the wearer that requires the wearer to be evil, obviously. It's a hell plate armor, so you have resistance to fire and poison. It's cursed, so it fuses to the skin, and remove curse destroys the armor, not just detaching it from the person, but destroying it. And it also causes the wearer to make more evil choices. We identify Fildo's flute, and it is the Caneth flute for bards only. It has a bunch of good spells in it, but can be used only by bards. We identify Wave, which was Delnus Deeprun's trident. We've had this in the bag for a while. It's sentient. It can only be attuned by someone who follows Istitia. It's a +3 to attack and damage, and you can also cast Force Cube from it, which is pretty dope. We identify the vial of white liquid, which we found in Adonis's shop. Neppy had got it from Adonis's shop, and it's a potion of wild magic, so she gives it to Clack. There is a claw potion that Kokanee has, and the consumer can cast Maximilian's Earthen Grasp. Kokanee has that. We identify the claw gauntlet that was the Baron's, and it can be well wielded by each new. Oh my gosh, words are hard today. Evil or neutral aligned person, and it is a barbed hook with needles and sticks needles into the wearer, doing 66 damage over the course of like a couple days. And if it's like 3 days, will sever the hand and like attach itself to the stump. So like gross. The claw can be used as either strength or dex, and this, if you like kill someone with the claw, like their souls are like consumed into the claw. That's terrifying. There's these spurs as well. Only neutral or evil person can wear them. Sorry, it's just evil, I think. And it binds you to a nightmare, so a fiendish steed. Letters had some thoughts about wearing them, so I think it's only an evil one that these spurs are at this point. There's also some Caraxian brandy. It's about 4 glasses worth of another Hero's Feast potion. Neppy can also cast Hero's Feast now, so that's dope. It's from Commander Griffin Vectan of the Construct Battalion, his private stock. So this is old AF brandy. And there's also, she's got 2 bottles of port there too that she is saving for special occasions. The pearl from Fildo is a pearl of power, which gives another up to 3 levels of spell slots. So that's given to Letters. And then there's this tiny little bug like gem-ish thing that looks in is a jar, and it seems to feed off magic. Spooky opens the jar, and it jumps out, attaches to her skin, and bites her. So she feels this pulse of power. This yellow energy crackles off her, and this is something called an Archimag. So it's this thing that 3 times per short rest she can cast a cantrip as a bonus action that would normally cost her an action. The first time it's free. The second time she takes damage equal to the level of the spell, and the third time I think there's just more damage. So she gains 1 additional spell slot per level up to 6 levels. That's dope. And then this Archimag, every time she casts a spell, she rolls a d20, and if it's a 1, the Archimag eats the magic, and then she loses the spell. I think that's very cool. Terrifying, but very cool. So that embeds into her skin, and she like wants it out, but we're like, no, like, let us please take it out of you tomorrow. We can go from there. It's not going to do much overnight. So the circlet, Kokanee, we identify that for Kokanee. It requires attunement. It's an enchantment. And it looks like you're seeing through essentially a construct's eyes. And it's part of a set of 2 other circlets. And that's what we find out. So that is the end of episode 55. Your episode 56 and episode 57 recap coming to you shortly. The next session was held on November 24th, and you will be getting that one shortly. Thanks, guys. Hello, everyone. Coming at you with your episode 56 recap for the Adventures of Blackwater session happening November 24th, 2019. This episode titled The Return of Barmwich. So we rest and wake up in the meat prison the following morning. The Archimag gem that still sits inside Spooky's arm has turned yellow as it kind of like burrows into her skin. Oh, actually, sorry, we haven't slept it. Yeah, so the Archimag gem turns yellow as it burrows into Spooky's skin. It's all very creepy and spooky, and Spooky's like, I want this out. I want this out. And so we'll, like, in the morning when we're all a bit fresher, just in case. Spooky has to identify on the ring that Callie plans to give to Kamea when she proposes, and it's not cursed, so it's fine. It's just, like, a lovely ring. They're just shooting the shit and chatting, and Kokanee asks Letters if he has siblings or talks to him about his family, and Letters says that he was one of the smallest ones within the pen when he was little, and he was bought very young. And so there was one from his original pen, he supposes, who was his brother, called a fodder boy or something like that, that they were kind of the, entertainment that was brought up before the main fight. So he essentially killed his penmate, I suppose. And he couldn't talk when he was young, but he learned letters, and that's how he learned his skills and kind of developed his abilities. And Baba bought him when he was quite young and, spotted the innate talent, and that's kind of part of what got him to where he was today. Or at least before we met him. He's about 15 years old, so that's middle-aged for a Minotaur. And so he goes and asks Torna how old she is, because, we're all giving him heck about sleeping with Torna. And furbolgs live a really long time, like a long-ass time. Torna is about 50, and she's younger, I think. I'm assuming like late 20s, early 30s-ish, essentially. Pets are like old, where, Clack is talking about how old they are, and he says that Kreger is young and remembers Caradoc. So Kreger remembers Caradoc, and he's young, so he's a minimum of 2,500 years old, which is crazy. So they're just talking still, and Letters asks Neppy if she's, like, ethically able to have a family, just kind of with her, the role that she's taken, and she says that she's not sure. Like, no high priestesses have ever had a family or been partnered or anything. They've all been pretty solitary, and it's not that it's against their rules, it's just nobody's ever done it, and there's kind of never been talked about. He asks Kokanee if he's physically able to have a family, and there's a lot of blushing. And then we all decide to sleep. So the night is uneventful. It's the most restful sleep that we've had in like the last 4 days. We wake up fully refreshed. Nobody had to keep watch because the folks down in the meat prison had kind of taken they'd been like keeping watch, so we could actually all sleep. So Olin, we wake up with a sense of like relief and freedom. In the morning, Spooky's dad, Olin, gives Spooky a letter. It's from Finnan. He said Olin said that Finnan left in the night to do more exploring and searching, trying to find out more about his patron and communing with the land, the area where Relauven and his people lived many thousands of years before. So Spooky at this point is like, get this thing out of me, I mean the Archimag. So a couple people try and pull it out, and they I think Callie and Kokanee both try. Neppy manages to kind of get a yank on it with her nails and pulls it out. And it drains one spell slot per level of Spooky's, I think up to like 4th level. And out of the periphery, Neppy kind of catches it
going upstairs. And so she runs upstairs, and it's in the second floor in this cage of rags, and she casts locate creature, so she knows it's in there. And she finds the rag and this ring, and she's like, wait a minute, like there's a ring, and like it's not in here. And then she grabs the ring and she's like, oh, this is the thing that it is. It's polymorphed itself, or like, you know, changed its like a bit like thing that it looks like into a ring. And she tries to put it back in the jar, and it tries to bite her, and it misses, and then she shoves it in the jar and gives it back to Spooky. So we plan to leave. Neppy casts sending to Kamea at Callie's request, and Kamea says that things are happening. Cora has gone missing, and all of the personal guard have vanished as well. It's very chaotic, but this is after she's been coronated, so she is still queen. So we, you know, that's pretty kind of unsettling. And we place Taryn in his cocoon sack. Just to like, well, we take him out of the cocoon sack and we put him in the bag, because for the the raise dead ritual to work, it would be helpful to have people who knew him to help revive him. So we take everyone and walk through the tunnels towards where the Quagoth grouping was, and you know they're pretty quiet people. We figure that they speak Undercommon, so we actually send Clack up to talk to them. It's a, you know, Olin, us is like, we're up front, Olin, the group. And Olin at this point has found out that Spooky goes by the name Spooky and calls her Yana, but even though everyone's calling her Spooky Pants. So it's like, we're up front, then the group, and Coraman, Torna, and Annalyn are at the back. There's this group of like all of the Quagoth, 20 or 30 of them, and these 8 larger Quagoth who we assume to be elders. Clack goes up to talk to them, and they allow us passage through if we don't want to harm them. Neppy creates some food for them as we pass through. We head back up and back through the fake prison. It's quiet. There's no activity, and people have been through here, but the bodies of the captains that we had left here before are undisturbed. And of the, like, one of the flesh golems, I think it was, or the jailer, yeah, like, they're all undisturbed. Not the flesh golem, sorry, just the jailer. They're undisturbed. So we scout ahead up into the foyer, and the front door is ajar. We send Wiggles to investigate upstairs first. He sees servants on the second floor kind of laying out food outside a few rooms. The dining room, and Spooky's mother is cleaning silverware. She seems different, not like how she was normally. There's no guards around either. Letters makes a loud noise, and Rosie's being Spooky's mother, head turns slightly, but something seems off about her. Kokanee sends a message to Rosie, and it fails. Spooky sends Wiggles closer to Rosie, and she recoils. So we, Neppy takes a peek at the front door. It's mid-morning. There's some sounds of shouting and cheering and this dark smoke that's happening. So we send everybody outside just to like go and see what's going on, and we go upstairs to grab Spooky's mom. So she's quite afraid of us when we get there, and Spooky casts Dispel magic on her this magic kind of fading around her mother from this like yellow to this like bluish green. She seems to regain recognition and is reunited with Spooky. It's this beautiful, wonderful reunion. And Fildo did something to her mind to make her quite like almost like an animal. Fucking bastard. And the other servants are like that too, but we don't really have time to dispel all the magic there, so we'll come back and do that later. We head outside, just in case there's something going on, and it's quiet. It seems deserted. We go to the center square, near the Eternal Abundance Shrine of Glitter Gold, and near the edge of the gold slums, there's this forge that there seems to be revelry and celebration. And we make our way through, and there's a bunch of Glitter Guard soldiers who are melting down their armor, and we see at the head of them is Gordo and Pipkin, the 2 soldiers who we let live essentially before, and Horlin. The captains abandoned the town sometime within the last 12 hours, basically after the Elder Brain. We killed the Elder Brain, and they're smelting down all of the armor. there's calls for elections, and Corriman reunites with his father Horlin, and the spirit is much more familiar to Spooky because, like, Barmwich is back, baby. This is great. We call for Friends of Terran, and we go to the Scale and Ale, which is the pub that they play at, and we have Chibuso, who's the front man of the band, who plays guitar, Bertram, who plays the fiddle, and Chem, who plays the pipes. Spooky reconnects with those she missed while we go and do this, and she finds Garmo, her uncle, and he's okay, and Falric, the wonderful innkeeper slash distillery owner who sheltered us when we were essentially fugitives on the run. So after all this is going on, we're inside the pub, the Scale and Ale, and the band boys retched when we bring Torrin out. They attempt to raise dead by helping with a performance. So they put on the performance of their lifetime, and it's not great. It's pretty rough. And so Neppy gets the sense that when she's casting Raise Dead, that she's kind of reaching farther than she's ever had to, but he does cross back, and we let him live, and we just go because we realize we've done enough. And so we leave. Callie takes a bottle of tequila and essentially ices herself. It's from the Chlor Reserve, so shout out to Chlor. And Neppy ends up Callie sasses her a bunch after she gets drunk, and Neppy takes a bottle of gin and takes it and keeps it for herself. So there's about 1,000. We return to the streets, and there's about 1,000 people partying in the streets of Barmwich. Kokanee goes up to Godor and Pipkin, and they just start so after they left, they started talking to people and rounded up 20 or 30 of the soldiers. They started spreading the word and planned to round up the captains. Corlin helped coordinate, but then the captains fled suddenly in unison up north, potentially through the Crinewood towards Icemeat, and then the sisters. So who knows where they're going, but it doesn't seem good. Peplum, who is the, I believe, a gnome kind of scribe for, and clerk for Fildo, comes up to Spooky and says, that he's pretty sweet on her. And he wants her to come run for office, and Clack sees this and is super choked up, and he's pretty jealous. And there was a line in there sometimes about, man, it's really hard to be free. And Peplum also lets Spooky know that there's the bounty has been dropped on her, of course, and she's welcome as home as a hero anytime. Neppy talks to Horlin and gets her boat back, of course, keeping tabs on everything. She is. Verdi is there as well, and joins in with the revelry. So we go to investigate the Bright Keep. We dispel the magic on the servants, returning them to their normal state. We find some jewelry in Fildo's room, but there's opulent fixtures and clothes. Kokanee looks for a tuxedo for Clack with no avail. There's this bath with white liquid in it. It's thick and viscous, and it's the same liquid that Neppy stuck her hand into, which might be inert, brain stuff, the same stuff that tried to reach out and get into Neppy's head when she touched it when it was down in the Underdark. We find the rest of the house. There's some ledgers, talk about trade, allocation of resources, no smoking gun really, some generic weapons which we take. We discuss future plans, which we mean to follow the guards, but while we're doing this, Clack casts his Wand of Wonder inside, and produces 40 gems, each valued at 1 gold piece each, which is great. And Callie convinces him, in her drunk state, to cast the Wand of Wonder again, and Clack ends up casting Fireball. It just almost destroys the room, and we take some damage from it. So yes, we follow the guards. We leave and we follow the guards after having just about enough of that. So we ask if Verdi can take us to the edge of the Crinewood. Spooky says goodbye to her parents, and they say, please come back and visit, but we suppose you belong to the world now.
Neppy casts a lesser restoration and to cure Callie of her drunkenness, and 2 greater restorations to remove the levels of exhaustion on her. So there is some other stuff that we did that session, but we retconned it a little bit as we were just about to pick up the path and follow the footsteps. But that is the end of episode 56, your episode 57 recap, coming to you shortly. And for the session happening on December 1st, 2019. Thanks so much, guys, and take care. Hello, everyone, here with your episode 57 recap for the Adventures of Blackwater, session happening yesterday, December 1st, 2019. Title of this episode, The Spaces Between. Okay, so we are just about to leave Barmwich, and Neppy realizes we need a couple things before we leave, so we all go to a jeweler at the edge of the Brightkeep village in Barmwich called the Gem's Embrace. There's 4 gnomes inside, and they're all very drunk. They're quadruplets. I only got the name of one of them, Fizz. So this older gnome kind of approaches us, and we kind of debate the price of not debate. Neppy just says she'll pay whatever he says for 200 gold pieces worth of ivory and 250 gold pieces worth of diamonds. She says she'd take as many diamonds as he has, and he's like all about the jewelry, and she's like, no, I just want the diamonds. So they, set to work basically taking the diamonds out of the jewelry, and they want to hang out with Clack. They know he's a petch, and they know about the Earth Elemental Plane for some reason. I want to know more about this, but we didn't really get into it. They want to get him drunk. They really want to get him drunk. We're worried that it's bad because Tim's been making a lot of jokes about killing Clack, but it's not bad. They just want to hang out with him and get him drunk. So while they're doing that, we go to a enchanter, because Letters is wanting some enchanted armor. So we go to see at their request, we go see Minlin Shortbottom. He's looking for a summoning armor of some description, and she said that she would kind of, do some reading about the enchantments needed, and to check in within a week. And she clocks the holy symbol of Arathis on Kokaney's chest, but doesn't say anything about it. But we notice, or I think Neppy notices maybe, that she clocks the symbol, but we don't say anything about it. She also takes a peek at Spooky's pants and is her entire demeanor changes. She says she would not keep those pants anywhere near any living creature. Necromancy is not something to be trifled with. It's not necessarily that she knows anything more about the pants themselves, but she knows that they're powerful magic, a powerful conduit of necromantic magic, and she's kind of uncertain about that. Neppy buys a bunch of incense from her as well for the legend lore spells that she wants to do on all of a bunch of equipment. So we head out into as we go back to get Clack. He's drunk, and we get the diamonds, and we only have 250 gold pieces, and we think about trying to get more. We ask people around, but there's really no more diamonds that we can get, so we just, Neppy just tells everybody not to die. Nobody is allowed to die when we go out into the Crinewood to try and potentially fight God knows how many people of all these captains and Cora. So we head out. Callie finds the tracks, and they follow directly north into the woods. So we decide to press on into the night. Neppy sees about 60 feet ahead. There's this creature in the clearing. It's dark at this point. Letter sends a firebolt next to it. The body is dead, and lights a bonfire next to the body. As he does that, the trees around us start to shake, and the trees are actually like giant, gargantuan spider legs. The legs themselves are like 60 feet tall. The body is so fucking big. It's so big. Like just a Leviathan spider. Just so big. And as we're attempting to run away from it, Kokanee kind of
takes a moment to clock what this thing is, and it shoots its paralytic web at Kokanee, and it misses. Thank God. And we just fucking book it. We keep going, and we eventually outrun this thing after about 15 minutes or so. It's lumbering pretty slowly through the forest. Callie finds the trail again, and we press on till morning. The forest starts to thin, and this dirt path kind of veers, connecting with an east-west road that we assume is potentially coming from Wolfreen. The trail heads west, and we keep going about another 2 hours. So we see that there's this stony plains in the distance. The like forest gives way to this meadow, completely open, and then there's kind of stony rocks kind of ahead. And in this meadow, there's about between 60 and 70 glitter guard captains. With their heads are gone. They're just like head stumps. And Cora is not here. 10 of the glitter guard soldiers that are lying on the ground have Queensguard armor, so we know that the guards from Wolfreen and the guards from Barmwich are here. There's an intermingling, but Cora is not here. And they're all lying in a circle, which is terrifying. And then like every 7th one, there is a body-sized space between them, and there's no tracks leaving. The space between each of the bodies doesn't look like there's any footprints leading away. We see some footprints of like Intellect Devourers leaving, or like around the heads, but then they just disappear. There's like no tracks leading off into the woods or anything like that. Neppy cast comprehend, or not Neppy, Spooky cast comprehend languages, because we potentially take a peek at this Qualith book, the book of the mind flayers that we found down in the laboratory, to see if we can glean anything from that. And it's like a specimens list, and it's pretty scientific. It's got a diagram of the flesh golem, and there's some discussion about how they're trying to train the pseudo dragon with the psionic and the sound vibration, the little Tyrell, the one that Callie had, that Finnan now carries the body of. Neppy tries to scry and cannot find Cora, meaning that like either Cora blocked her, she's not on the same plane of existence, or she's dead. Kind of those 3 options. Letters does Sky right, and at this point he says, we have, writes across the sky in giant cloud letters, we have Fildo, we're in the clearing, get fucked, Cora. So we see these Intellect Devour tracks, and we chat around and trying to figure out what happened. And Neppy brings up that they might have used a portal, like a gate magic. There would have been too many of them to simply plane shift to the astral plane, likely, because there's, over 10, because the plane shift is like 8. But if there are things that were floating, they were likely illithid, so then they would all have just been able to plane shift anyway, and they could have probably taken all of the Intellect Devourers with them, or they could have used some form of gate magic to open up a giant portal and take them all back to the astral plane. Whatever it is, it's bad mamma jam, and it's not good. Neppy casts Sending to Cora, and it, there's definitely a bit of a push to it. Shows it's likely that she's on another plane of existence, and Neppy sends to her, your cowardice has surprised even me. We will hunt you down wherever you go. Death will find you. It always does. And Cora sends back, you will pay for what you have taken from me. I assure you, my eyes have been opened, and you will only know pain. So it's not good. So we kind of decide what to do. Clack is he still drunk? Yeah, he might still be drunk at this point. And he vomits some sand. And Spooky says that she, they're just chatting, and, it's talking about something. Clack says something about not being noticed, and Spooky says, kind of quite,
unassumingly that she's never noticed anything about him, and he's devastated. He's so sad. Letter tells Spooky that, he hurt his feelings, and actually to make it up with him, potentially by going on a date with him, and she doesn't believe that this is the best way to make it up to him, or that it's an earth elemental tradition. She gives Clack a rock at Letter's suggestion. It's not granite, but it's fine, but he's kind of charmed with it. She she says, in a joking manner, "I'm sorry I took you for granted." And he says, as they're plane shifting back to Siral, which is this where they decide to go to finally try and take steps to head back to Wolfreen, Clack says, "I'm sorry I sculpted a naked bust of you without you asking, or without asking you." And Spooky doesn't give consent to this, and this is bad. And he says, no, it's fine, I buried it, I don't have it anymore, but he does tell Callie where he buried it. So we, after this wonderful interaction, as we were saying, yes, we decide that it's time for us to head back to Wolfreen, and while Spooky and Clack are kind of having this debate, Letters wants to rearrange the bodies to say something shitty to Cora, but they decide not to do it. Neppy's like, we should probably burn these bodies so that they don't come back as undead, but we don't do that either. We just really want to get back home to Wolfreen, so we decide to plane shift to Siral, which will kind of to go see Chi, which will kind of give us the fastest way there, and it's a safe place for us to go, and all we need to do is rest before the talisman recharges. So we plane shift, we end up on the steps of the temple. It's Letter's first time to the earth elemental plane, so he's kind of taking in the sights of the Temple of the Winged Serpent and looking at these beautiful islands, floating islands around. Chi welcomes us in and gives us food. Letters and Spooky decide to rest first and then spend their morning reading books. Callie is just like, oh my God, I have to sleep so that I can go see Kamea, and she sleeps, and then she's just awake pacing, and then before Letters goes to sleep, or Neppy's like, well, I would like to go do a little bit of exploring. I don't know when the next time I'm going to be in Siral is. Letters casts Fly on her, and so she flies up to this island about 40 feet away. She comes up about on a mid-sized island just by herself, and she comes across these larger giants that are 20 to 24 feet high, and they're cloud giants. They're super aloof. They've got beautiful clothing and jewelry, and it's just this magical marketplace that she's just walking through. Neppy loving a market, reminding her of home on the Amonkhet. So she has this wonderful moment where she goes through the market and she sees this jewelry and textiles vendor named Orion, and he seems pretty aloof and doesn't care much about anything, but she asks him for something that she could hang in the entrance foyer of their new house in Wolfreen. So it's something from the earth elemental plane or the air elemental plane to bring home. So she trades. At this point, her fly spell has dropped after 10 minutes, and Kokanee, says, hey, Neppy just went that way, can you fly me over there? And Letters goes, oh, we'll both go. And so they they fly over, and just as Neppy's about to trade the cave dragon teeth, they kind of come over and they're chatting and stuff like that, and so Neppy trades the cave dragon teeth and the claws for it, and Kokanee says, do you want to kind of walk around the marketplace, and spends a bit of time here, and Letters says, okay, well, you two have fun, I'm gonna go back. And then he tries to spy on them, but he rolls a nat 1 in his stealth check, so they know he thinks he's pretty stealthy. They know, Neppy for sure knows he's here, and Kokanee definitely knows. So, but then they start walking through the markets, going to buy linens and textiles for their house, their room at the new house. And Letters gets bored and leaves because they're just out buying fabrics on a date. And then they talk, and they kind of move through marketplace and just have a really lovely couple hours together, because they probably haven't had that in a very long time, probably since Wolfreen, or somewhere around there, after that, yeah, a long time. So they kind of go out to the edge of this, the kind of this precipice of this island overlooking just this like expanse of air. And Neppy asks if they know Kokanee really wants to go back to they don't. Neppy really wants to go back home to Philenis at some point, and Kokanee is both feeling the urge to go back and also terrified to go back of what is going to happen when they go back to Bacall. So Neppy asks if he wants to go to Philenis or Bacall first, and he's impartial, and so she's like, well, perhaps we could go to Philenis first. It might be rejuvenating and would be wonderful for me to see everyone, for her to see everyone before they go to Bacall and potentially get in the thick of it again. They discuss, then the party, like kind of a celebratory nature of her return potentially to Philenis and some of the traditions there around substance usage and where that comes from. So Kokanee asks about that, and there's a grove in the back of the temple where these trees grow, the Alamwat trees, and they burn their dead at Temple Philenis, so the ashes are used to fertilize the trees and fertilize the ground, and these trees grow these fruit called rila, and then they pick the fruit and then they put it in the white water substance that is like they get from the big oasis that the temple is built around, that Neppy carries a little bit of the water with her, that helps with healing magic, and then it ferments for like a month, and then you drink it, and that is called Rilashara, and it is an intoxicating substance, not similar to like a little bit of like ecstasy and a little bit of like LSD, a little bit maybe, and a little bit of like cannabis. So like time dilates a little bit. You feel like really pleasant physical sensations. Nothing too bad, nothing bad. Like there's never been really any like bad trips or anything like that. You feel this like very calm nature, and then that the priestesses usually go at the like celebrations from an acolyte's kind of like ascension to a priestess, or like really any excuse for them to have a party. They drink Rilashara and then they go swimming in the oasis, and that is like, there's the hopes that when she returns that there will be, they'll all get to kind of like all of Blackwater. She will invite all of Blackwater to kind of go do this, and it'll be a wonderful party celebration. So then they discuss kind of like them going to Philenis and like what does Neppy call him when they go back to Philenis. And so she is like, her name is like a high priestess. She is called like Nepenthe, she with eyes that shine, and he is a high priest. And what does she call him? Because the high mother superior is going to know that something is different between her and him, and so he says he'll think on it. Then he asks her to a favor or to do something for him, and he asks her that if he dies in Bacall, and that Neppy can't bring him back, that I'm not quite sure the language, the exact phrasing that was used, but in essence that she just murder everyone, that she take down everyone, and that he doesn't want to die anymore, and that he doesn't want to have to go through that process of having to die all over again as he has at the hands of the Sultan and his father before. So Neppy promises him that she will start with the priestesses who kept bringing him back and have essentially like perverted the magic of her goddess, and like it is a complete insult to the magic that she uses and her entire religion. So she's going to start with those priestesses and make sure they know the extent of their wrongdoing. Then she's going to turn her attention to the Sultan and make sure just that he understands the true meaning of the pain that he's caused. And then she's going to turn her eye towards Kokanee's father and make sure that he also understands the full extent of the pain that he has brought to the person she cares about very much in the world. So that's what they promise, and she promises to keep him alive until he's old, and they're old together, and it's really nice. And I believe Sean Deppner said in the background, that's the kind of shit that I wanted to spy on in any case. So while they're back at the library, and then at the end of the
at the end of their like lovely little date, Kokanee takes the cape of the mountebank and kind of dimension doors them back to the steps of the temple, and then they rest for the evening. During the rest of it, Letters is in the library, and I missed what was something that he was reading a book on something, and he read about a mage named Coriath, someone named Malsav, and someone named Jexar the Forgotten. I didn't, and they were presumed dead. They have attained power but became overwhelmed. I missed the rest of it, and likely nobody's going to fill me in on it, so that's fine. And then Spooky finds a book on Orin, air and wind magic that expands on the last time she read stuff that way. So meanwhile, we then wake up, everyone wakes up fully rested, and we plane shift back to Wolfreen, and it's so exciting. We land in Kamea's yard. It's early morning. Mara welcomes us inside. It is, Kamea comes outside. It's this beautiful reunion between Callie and Kamea. Callie lifts Kamea up and just takes her upstairs for a time. And we all just kind of wait downstairs while that's happening. A jar comes and like leaps into Neppy's arms and says that, you know, asks if we're here to stay. And Neppy says we are for as long as we can. We eat breakfast, and it's wonderful and so nice to be back home, as much of a home as Blackwater has had to this point. Letters is going to teach Jar, not now that she already knows Firebolt, but he's going to teach her how to do Create Bonfire. And that is where we ended off. Next session happening Sunday, December 8th, regular time, regular place. So excited to be back in Wolfreen. Love you guys, and is it Sunday yet?
Thanks for listening to this installment of the Blackwater Archives covering the Barmwich Arc. Well done for making it through 4 hours of content. If you like what you hear, come hang out with us live on Saturday nights for the continuation of our main campaign at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at twitch.tv/BlackwaterDND. As always, we'll be discussing more lore and campaign history on Chatwater on Mondays and debriefing the latest episode. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And remember, never go it alone, or a mind flayer might eat your brain. Be safe!